The moon hung low in the sky, its silvery light casting long shadows over an ancient forest. In the stillness, a fox stood at the edge of a clearing, its golden eyes gleaming with an intelligence far beyond its kind. For centuries, people whispered stories about creatures like this, beings that walked the line between the natural and the supernatural. They weren't gods, nor were they ordinary animals or humans. They were something in between, something strange, powerful, and deeply tied to the heartbeat of the land. Yokai are more than stories. They breathe life into the unseen, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. In a country where mountains touch the heavens and rivers whisper secrets to the winds, the idea of spirits existing everywhere feels as natural as the seasons changing. To understand yokai, one must first understand a world where the boundaries between the living and the mysterious are so thin, they blur like ink on wet paper. They are not just monsters. Some frighten, yes, but others charm, help, or simply exist, their presence like the faintest rustle of leaves on a windless night. The stories of yokai come from a time when every sound in the dark had meaning. When an unseen hand pushed your lantern off the table or a gust of wind scattered your rice, it wasn't mere accident, it was the work of a playful spirit or a malevolent force. Yokai became the explanation for the inexplicable, giving form to fears and hopes alike. In ancient Japan, the nights were long and quiet, and life moved at the pace of the seasons. People would gather around flickering fires, sharing tales that sent shivers through their spines. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were warnings, lessons, and sometimes acts of rebellion against a harsh, uncontrollable world. A hungry family might find comfort in the idea that a wandering yokai was responsible for their misfortune, not just bad luck or poor harvest. The stories gave shape to feelings too big to hold. Even their appearance is not fixed. Yokai can take on countless forms, from grotesque beasts to ethereal beauties. A woman with long, tangled hair and a single, mournful eye might haunt the edge of a village, her sorrow as heavy as the rain that falls endlessly around her. A grotesque creature with a cavernous mouth could crouch in the shadows, waiting to consume the fears of those who pass by. These forms aren't chosen at random, they reflect the emotions and uncertainties of those who tell their stories. But yokai are not bound by human morality. Their actions often defy explanation. They can be kind, cruel, or indifferent, like nature itself. A fox spirit might bless a farmer with bountiful crops one year, only to lead him astray in a fog the next. The unpredictability is part of their allure. They remind us that not everything in life is within our control. Long ago, monks and travelers would write about strange encounters in the wilderness. They spoke of creatures with glowing eyes that appeared out of nowhere, leading people into endless forests or vanishing into thin air. These tales spread, growing richer with every retelling. Over time, yokai became more than local legends, they became part of the collective heartbeat of Japan. Even as times changed, the spirit of yokai endured. The Edo period saw a flowering of art and literature that gave yokai vivid, unforgettable forms. Woodblock prints and paintings captured their beauty, terror, and whimsy, spreading their stories to a wider audience. People who had never ventured beyond their village could now see the haunting image of a yurei, a ghostly woman with sunken eyes and flowing robes, or laugh at the antics of a mischievous tanuki. These creations weren't just about scaring people, they were mirrors, reflecting the world's joys and fears. During times of peace, yokai became playful, their antics bringing laughter to those who read about them. In harder times, their tales grew darker, filled with warnings about greed, betrayal, or unchecked ambition. Yokai stories adapted to the people who needed them, shifting like shadows to meet the moment. To some, yokai are just stories, figments of the imagination shaped by a culture steeped in the natural world. But to those who listen closely, they are whispers of something more. They live in the spaces we overlook, in the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, or the faintest chill that runs down your spine when you're alone. It's said that yokai often reflect the times in which they appear. When cities began to grow and the wild places of Japan shrank, new yokai appeared. Urban legends spoke of spirits haunting bridges, train stations, and abandoned buildings. Some say these modern yokai are born from the loneliness and alienation of city life, just as their ancient counterparts grew from the mysteries of the forests and mountains. Yet, despite the modern world's bright lights and endless noise, yokai haven't disappeared. They hide in plain sight, woven into festivals, art, and even popular media. Children laugh at stories of mischievous spirits, while adults nod knowingly, recognizing the deeper truths those stories carry. The presence of yokai reminds people of their connection to something greater, something older than cities and machines. There's a moment, standing alone in the stillness of night, when the world feels impossibly vast and utterly intimate at the same time. The feeling of being watched, not by another person, but by something just out of reach, that is the essence of yokai. They are born from that fleeting, electric sensation that there's more to the world than what we see. They thrive in the quiet moments between heartbeats, when the line between the known and the unknown seems to vanish. Every yokai story, whether terrifying or heartwarming, holds a spark of that ancient truth: the world is alive, filled with mysteries waiting to be noticed. And as long as people gather around fires, sharing their fears and hopes with one another, yokai will remain. A quiet wind brushed through the ancient forest, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and pine. The trees, their gnarled roots twisted like veins through the ground, stood silent and watchful. It was a place where every shadow seemed alive, every whisper of the wind carried a voice. In the hushed stillness, it was easy to believe that something unseen lingered there, something older than time itself. Long before humans tamed the wild, there was a belief that everything had a spirit. The mountains that scraped the skies, the rivers that carved their way through valleys, the stones that sat unmoving for centuries, all were alive. The world wasn't just filled with life, it was life. To disturb a stream was to upset its spirit, to fell a tree was to anger the force within it. This understanding wasn't born from fear but from reverence. The people of those ancient times didn't see themselves as rulers of the world but as part of it, woven into its fabric like threads in a tapestry. The roots of yokai can be traced to this belief, to a time when animism shaped every interaction with the world. Spirits weren't separate from the physical world, they were the essence of it. When a fire burned too brightly and consumed a home, it wasn't a random tragedy, it was the fire spirit, hungry and untamed. If the wind howled through the mountains, bending trees and shaking homes, it wasn't mere weather, it was a restless spirit, demanding attention. Shinto, Japan's indigenous faith, grew from this foundation. It didn't speak of gods in distant heavens, but of kami, spirits that existed all around, and everything. Kami weren't all-powerful, they weren't even always benevolent. They were as unpredictable as the forces of nature they represented. Some kami were protectors, watching over villages or guiding travelers through treacherous terrain. Others were fickle or even vengeful, punishing those who disrespected the land or failed to honor their presence. In these beliefs, the seeds of yokai were sown. While kami were often revered and worshipped, yokai existed in the spaces between, a reflection of the unknown and the misunderstood. A darkened forest path, where shapes moved just beyond the edge of sight, wasn't simply a patch of trees. It was a place inhabited by something, perhaps a spirit or a being that wasn't quite divine. As Buddhism made its way to Japan, it mingled with these ancient beliefs, creating something uniquely its own. Buddhism brought with it stories of suffering, rebirth, and karma, and these ideas blended seamlessly with the existing spiritual fabric. The belief that actions in life could ripple through the world like waves in a pond gave rise to stories of spirits bound by their deeds, unable to move on. A woman abandoned by her lover might become a yurei, her sorrow twisting her into something both tragic and terrifying. A man consumed by greed might return as a monstrous being, forever cursed by his own desires. Buddhism also brought a sense of hierarchy to the spirit world, dividing beings into those who could ascend and those who remained trapped in the cycle of suffering. Yokai often represented those who were caught, spirits too tied to the earthly world to transcend it. Yet even within their misfortune, there was a sense of awe. These weren't merely lost souls, they were embodiments of emotions too intense to fade, desires too strong to die. The blending of Shinto and Buddhist traditions created a world rich with stories. In the midst of the mountains, it was said, dwelled the Tengu, half-bird, half-man beings who tested travelers, punishing the arrogant and rewarding the humble. In the rivers lurked Kappa, mischievous creatures who could be dangerous but were also known to help those who earned their trust. These beings weren't just figments of the imagination, they were reflections of a world where every element had meaning, every action a consequence. Over time, the stories of yokai evolved, shaped by the fears and hopes of the people who told them. During times of peace, yokai were often portrayed as playful tricksters, their antics bringing laughter and light to long evenings. In darker times, they took on more sinister forms, embodying the anxieties and hardships of the age. Yet no matter how they were portrayed, their origins remained rooted in a shared understanding: the world was alive, and its spirits walked among us. The old belief in animism ensured that no place was truly empty. A quiet shrine at the base of a hill might be home to a benevolent kami, watching over travelers who paused to offer their prayers. But the same shrine, neglected and overgrown with weeds, might attract something darker, an onryo, a vengeful spirit, drawn by the weight of forgotten offerings and broken promises. Even objects could hold life. An umbrella left and used for 100 years might awaken as a tsukumagami, its once ordinary existence transformed into something strange and animated. This idea wasn't just a story for children, it was a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. To care for an object was to respect its spirit, to discard it carelessly was to invite its wrath. The origins of yokai are as old as the land itself, tied to the rhythms of nature and the stories people told to make sense of their world. They are born from a belief that nothing is truly lifeless, that every shadow holds a presence, and every sound in the night has a source. It's not just the wind that makes the branches creak, it's something more, something that watches, waits, and remembers. In the quiet corridors of a crumbling Heian-era mansion, a soft rustle broke the stillness. A woman, her face pale in the glow of an oil lamp, turned her head sharply. The flickering light danced on paper walls, and shadows seemed to shift on their own. She whispered a prayer under her breath. She knew the stories, knew what could lurk beyond those thin walls. It wasn't just the wind that sighed, it wasn't just her imagination. It was something else, something ancient and restless. In the Heian period, the world was rich with mystery, its edges blurred by superstition and belief. It was a time when the line between life and the unseen was razor-thin, when every misstep could stir the wrath of an invisible force. The aristocrats of this age recorded these encounters in journals, their ink-stained brushes capturing tales of eerie lights floating over rice fields, spectral women with hollow eyes, and monstrous beasts that appeared on desolate roads. These were not just stories, they were warnings, maps of the unknown etched into the fabric of everyday life. This was the age when Onmyoji, the court's spiritual advisors, held immense power. They were tasked with unraveling the mysteries of yokai, their chants and rituals weaving a fragile barrier between the living and the spirits that lingered just beyond sight. The Heian period was a time of fear and reverence, when every illness, every accident, every unexplainable event could be traced to the influence of an unseen force. As centuries passed, the stories of yokai grew louder, carried on the tongues of commoners and merchants. The Kamakura period was a turbulent era, a time of war and unrest, and with it came yokai that reflected the chaos. Warriors spoke of ghostly samurai who roamed battlefields, their armor stained with the blood of endless battles, their spirits unable to find peace. Farmers whispered of the Joragumo, a spider-woman who lured unsuspecting men into her web, her beauty masking a deadly hunger. These tales spread like wildfire, fueled by the collective anxiety of a nation in turmoil. Then came the Edo period, a golden age for yokai. The long years of peace allowed art, literature, and theater to flourish, and with them came a blossoming of folklore. Artists like Toriyama Sekian began compiling yokai into illustrated encyclopedias, giving these spirits shapes and faces that still linger in the imagination today. The grotesque, the whimsical, the terrifying, they all found a place in his works. Edo towns were alive with stories. Lantern-lit streets carried whispers of mischievous tanuki, their shape-shifting tricks amusing and infuriating travelers. The creaking of old wooden houses became the stomping grounds of Zashiki Warashi, playful child spirits said to bring good fortune to those who treated them kindly. Even the humblest of objects came alive in these tales. A forgotten teapot might sprout legs and eyes, becoming a tsukumagami, a reminder that even the most mundane things could hold hidden life. The theaters of Edo brought yokai to life in a different way. Kabuki plays featured vengeful ghosts and heroic exorcists, their stories thrilling audiences who saw their own fears reflected on the stage. The haunting image of a Yurei, with her white burial kimono and long, unbound hair, became iconic, her sorrowful eyes etched into the collective consciousness of Japan. But yokai didn't remain confined to stages or paintings. The Meiji Restoration brought sweeping changes, pulling Japan into a new era of modernization and science. As the country turned its gaze outward, embracing railroads, electricity, and industry, the old ways began to fade. Yokai, once woven into the fabric of everyday life, began to retreat into the shadows. Yet even as the world changed, the yokai persisted. They adapted, slipping into the cracks of a modernizing society. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, yokai found new life in literature. Writers like Lafcadio Hearn, a Westerner captivated by Japanese folklore, preserved these tales in collections that introduced them to audiences far beyond Japan's borders. His works carried the ghostly whispers of the past into a rapidly changing present. The horrors of the 20th century, with its wars and upheavals, gave birth to yokai that reflected the anxieties of a world in turmoil. Urban legends began to surface, tales of spirits haunting subway stations or abandoned buildings. Kukusekana, the slit-mouthed woman, emerged in these times, her tragic and terrifying story spreading like wildfire among schoolchildren. These modern yokai weren't tied to forests or mountains, they belonged to the cities, born from the isolation and fear of modern life. And still, they endured. The post-war era brought a resurgence of interest in yokai, as artists and storytellers reclaimed these ancient tales. Manga and anime breathed new life into old legends, presenting them in ways that resonated with younger generations. Mizuki Shigeru, a beloved manga artist, dedicated his life to bringing yokai to the forefront of popular culture. His works gave these spirits a voice, reminding people that they were more than relics of the past, they were a living part of Japan's cultural identity. Today, yokai are everywhere, their presence as vibrant as ever. They live in the pages of comics, the frames of animated films, and the flicker of festival lanterns. Yet, beneath these modern interpretations lies a connection to something ancient, something that has watched over humanity for centuries. The timelines of yokai are not bound by linear progression. They ebb and flow like the tide, shifting to reflect the fears, hopes, and dreams of each generation. They are timeless, ever-present, and forever tied to the heartbeat of the land and the people who call it home. The fire crackled softly, sending flickering shadows across the weathered faces gathered around it. An old man sat at the center, his voice low but steady, his words winding through the air like smoke. He spoke of a woman with hollow eyes who roamed the edge of the village, her mournful wail cutting through the night. As he told the tale, the children edged closer to the fire, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. Even the adults, who had heard this story 100 times before, sat still, their breaths quiet, as though afraid to draw the spirit's attention. This was more than a story. It was a warning, a history, a thread binding the living to the unseen world around them. Through the old man's voice, the woman with hollow eyes became real, her sorrow and rage alive in the hearts of those who listened. Storytelling has always been the heartbeat of yokai lore, the lifeline through which these beings have survived the march of time. Long before written words etched them into books, yokai lived in the mouths of storytellers, passed from parent to child, elder to youth. A flickering candle in a darkened room was all it took to bring them to life, their forms painted in shadows and whispers. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were warnings etched into the memory of a community, lessons wrapped in fear and wonder. A tale of the kappa lurking in a river wasn't merely a frightening anecdote, it was a reminder to respect the water's edge, to keep children safe from the current's pull. The story of the Yukiana, the Snow Woman, was more than a haunting winter's tale. It was a cautionary reminder of nature's unforgiving beauty, of the dangers that lay hidden beneath the cold white blanket of snow. Through oral traditions, yokai became part of everyday life. Their names were spoken in hushed tones, their habits detailed with precision. People knew which paths to avoid at dusk, which offerings might appease an angry spirit. These stories wove the world together, connecting the seen and unseen, the mundane and the magical. As time passed, the spoken word gave way to brush and ink, and yokai found new homes in the pages of art and literature. Artists captured their shapes with breathtaking detail, their imaginations giving form to beings that had previously lived only in the shadows of the mind. The grotesque and the beautiful mingled on scrolls and screens, their features exaggerated yet eerily familiar. Toriyama Sekien's works brought yokai into sharper focus. With each stroke of his brush, he immortalized them, cataloging their quirks and characteristics in ways that blurred the line between fiction and reality. His illustrations weren't just depictions, they were invitations to believe, to wonder if that creak in the floorboards or that flicker of movement out of the corner of your eye might be something more. In literature, yokai began to take on deeper layers. Lafcadio Hearn's retellings of ghostly legends brought their stories to life in vivid prose, capturing both their terror and their tragedy. Through his words, yokai became more than figures of fear. They became reflections of human emotion, grief, rage, longing, embodied in forms that could not be ignored. Art and literature didn't just preserve these stories, they expanded them. They added new details, new interpretations, creating a mosaic of yokai that evolved with each retelling. A story shared in a rural village might grow legs as it traveled to a bustling city, its details shifting to fit the fears and experiences of a different audience. A mischievous fox spirit in one tale might become a vengeful trickster in another, its nature shaped by the teller's imagination. The stage brought yokai to life in yet another way. Kabuki and no plays, with their elaborate costumes and haunting music, turned these spirits into living, breathing presences. Audiences watched, spellbound, as ghostly figures moved across the stage, their otherworldly forms brought to life by the skill of the performers. The crack of a fan, the eerie call of a flute, these sounds carried the weight of centuries, their echoes filling the theater with a sense of something ancient and unshakable. Even as the world changed, as cities grew and technology advanced, the role of storytelling in yokai lore never faded. It adapted. The printed word gave yokai new homes in manga and novels, their stories reaching audiences far beyond the borders of Japan. The flickering glow of a campfire was replaced by the glow of a television screen, but the effect was the same. Children still sat wide-eyed, their imaginations racing, as animated tales of mischievous tanuki and vengeful urei played out before them. Modern storytellers have embraced the spirit of those who came before, weaving yokai into new narratives that resonate with contemporary fears and dreams. Films like Spirited Away and The Ring carry the echoes of ancient tales, their stories rooted in the same timeless themes of awe and fear. Yokai may change their forms, but their essence remains unpredictable, haunting, unforgettable. The role of storytelling is not just to preserve yokai but to give them life. Each word spoken, each brushstroke made, each performance enacted breathes new energy into their existence. They are not relics of the past, but living beings, carried forward by the voices and imaginations of those who tell their tales. When the fire's light dims, and the room falls silent, it's easy to feel their presence. They linger in the space between words, and the pause before the next story begins. They are the rustle in the trees, the whisper in the wind, the shadow that dances just beyond the edge of sight. And through storytelling, they remain with us, as vivid and eternal as the stars in the night sky. The moon hung low over a dense forest, its silver light barely piercing the canopy of trees. Somewhere deep within the woods, a single, echoing cry split the silence. It wasn't the sound of any ordinary animal, it was sharp, chilling, and laced with something otherworldly. A fox with golden eyes emerged from the shadows, its gaze steady, its presence unnervingly human. The villagers whispered about such creatures, ones that carried secrets in their soft paws and danger in their breath. Among the many kinds of yokai, some were the guise of animals. They prowl, they soar, they slither through the folds of the world, their forms familiar, but their spirits anything but. Foxes, or kitsune, are the most cunning of them all. Known for their intelligence and magic, they can weave illusions so intricate that even the sharpest mind can't escape their grasp. They might bring prosperity to those they favor or lead the unwary into ruin. Their ability to shapeshift often blurs the line between beast and human. Stories speak of foxes who take the form of beautiful women, entering human lives only to leave chaos in their wake. Then there are the tanuki, the mischievous tricksters with round bellies and playful grins. They are shapeshifters too, but unlike the sly kitsune, their tricks are often harmless, even humorous. Tanuki dance between light-hearted mischief and moments that feel like gentle lessons, reminding people not to take life, or themselves, too seriously. But don't mistake their whimsy for weakness. When provoked, even these jovial spirits can lash out with startling ferocity. Not all animal yokai carry charm or mischief. Some are nothing but hunger and menace, their forms twisting nature's beauty into something grotesque. The Joragumo, a spider woman, spins her web in secluded places, waiting for unsuspecting travelers. Her allure is impossible to resist, and her venom is fatal. Her legend is a stark warning about temptation, about the shadows that lie beneath beauty's surface. Beyond the animal yokai, there are those born from the forgotten and discarded, the object-based spirits known as tsukumagami. A rusted teapot, a worn-out sandal, or an abandoned lantern might seem harmless, but neglect them too long, and they awaken. Tsukumagami rise from things once cherished and later cast aside, their anger often directed at those who treated them with thoughtless disdain. There's a bittersweet sadness to these spirits. Each one tells a story of human carelessness, of objects that once carried meaning now transformed into symbols of vengeance. A battered umbrella, known as a casa-obake, might hop through the night on a single leg, its wide eye glaring at anyone who crosses its path. These spirits remind us of the weight of our actions, the lives we imbue into the things we use and discard without a second thought. Yet, not all object yokai are vengeful. Some remain whimsical, even playful. A biwabokubaku, a lute brought to life, might wander the streets at night, serenading the world with haunting melodies. These spirits bridge the gap between the inanimate and the living, their presence a gentle nudge to cherish what we have while we can. And then there are those born from the wild forces of nature, the yokai that embody the elements themselves. They are the roar of the wind, the crash of the waves, the unrelenting fury of a storm. These spirits are powerful and unpredictable, their moods as shifting as the natural phenomena they represent. The tengu, half-bird, half-human creatures, are tied to the mountains and skies. They are protectors of sacred spaces, yet they can be vengeful and arrogant. Their fiery eyes and sharp beaks pierce through human arrogance, humbling those who dare to trespass on hallowed ground. But they are also teachers, bestowing knowledge on those they deem worthy. Their dual nature, both fierce and wise, reflects the raw, untamed spirit of the mountains they inhabit. The Yumabozu, on the other hand, are the terrors of the sea. Sailors tell of colossal figures rising from the waves, their black forms blotting out the stars. To encounter in Yumabozu is to confront the unknown depths, the fear that lies beneath the surface of the water. They are relentless and merciless, capsizing ships with a flick of their massive hands. But some say they are born of drowned souls, their rage a reflection of humanity's fear and sorrow. Even the gentler elements hold their own yokai. The Yukiana, the snow woman, drifts silently through winter nights, her pale beauty as cold and unforgiving as the blizzard she brings. Her touch is death, yet her stories are often tinged with tragedy. She is not just a spirit of frost, but a reflection of isolation, of love lost to the chill of the world. Nature-based yokai are perhaps the most primal of all, their existence tied to forces far beyond human control. They are reminders of the power and fragility of life, of the delicate balance that exists between humanity and the world around us. They are the rustling leaves in an empty forest, the sudden gust of wind that sends shivers down your spine, the thunder that roars without warning. In each category of yokai, there lies a thread of connection, a reflection of humanity's fears, hopes, and regrets. They are not separate from us, but born of our stories, our actions, our imaginations. And in their forms, whether animal, object, or nature, they carry a mirror that forces us to look at the shadows within ourselves. The lantern's glow flickered uncertainly in the breeze, casting long, trembling shadows along the forest path. A traveler paused, sensing a presence just beyond the reach of the light. He scanned the trees, his breath catching as a pair of golden eyes blinked open in the darkness. There, perched on a rock, was a fox. Its fur shimmered like fire in the dim light, and though it did not move, the air seemed to thrum with an unspoken warning. Kitsune. The word itself carries weight, a mixture of reverence and unease. Foxes are no ordinary creatures in these tales. They are spirits of immense power and cunning, able to bend reality to their will. It's said that the longer they live, the more powerful they become, each century granting them another tale until they reach the pinnacle of their strength at 9. But what do they want? Are they guardians, teachers, or tempters? The answer lies in the flickering line between their beauty and their menace. In one story, a farmer stumbles across an injured fox and, moved by its plight, nurses it back to health. Days later, he finds his fields flourishing, his life inexplicably prosperous. A beautiful woman visits his home, her presence a blessing that turns his modest existence into something extraordinary. But the woman never stays after sunset, disappearing into the shadows of the night. When curiosity overtakes him, the farmer follows her and discovers the truth. His visitor is the very fox he had saved, now repaying his kindness. The tale ends in bittersweet gratitude, a reminder that even spirits can feel a bond of loyalty. But kitsune are not always kind. There are tales of foxes weaving intricate illusions, luring men with promises of wealth or love only to leave them destitute or insane. A merchant might be enticed by the sight of glittering treasures, only to awaken hours later in a cold, empty field with nothing but handfuls of dirt. What drives these mischievous acts? Some say it is the fox's nature to test humans, to strip away their pretensions and reveal the truth beneath. For all their cunning, there is an undercurrent of tragedy in their stories. In some tales, kitsune fall in love with humans, shedding their magical guise to live as mortals. But this love is fragile, doomed to shatter when their true nature is discovered. When a human husband finds his wife's foxtail hidden away, her secret is revealed, and she must flee, leaving behind the family she so desperately wanted to protect. The heartbreak of these tales lingers, a reminder of the chasm between the mortal and the magical. If kitsune are creatures of elegance and enigma, the tanuki stands as their rowdy, unpredictable counterpart. Raccoon dogs are shaggy and round, their faces carrying a perpetual glint of humor. But don't be fooled by their jovial appearance. Tanuki are shapeshifters of immense skill, their tricks every bit as effective as the foxes, if a little more chaotic. One night, a group of travelers gathers around a roadside tea house, exhausted from their journey. They drink and eat, grateful for the warmth of the fire and the hospitality of their unseen host. When they wake in the morning, they find themselves lying in the middle of a forest clearing, surrounded by nothing but leaves and twigs. The tea house? An illusion conjured by a tanuki, who likely watched them with glee as they stumbled through the deception. But tanuki's pranks aren't always harmless. In rare moments, their stories take darker turns, their trickery leaving humans in dangerous situations. Yet even then, there's a certain charm to their chaos, a sense that these mischievous spirits are teaching lessons, however harsh. Respect the wild. Do not underestimate the unseen. Unlike kitsune, who often weave tragedy into their tales, tanuki are almost always portrayed with a sense of whimsy. Their antics, while disruptive, carry a strange warmth, as though reminding people to find humor even in the face of frustration. It's this balance, between cunning and foolishness, trickery and laughter, that makes them such compelling figures in the folklore. Beyond the kitsune and tanuki, there are other animal yokai whose forms carry a deeper, more unsettling air. The mujina, or badger spirits, are said to transform into faceless humans, erasing their features like a blank canvas. Encountering a Mujina at night is a test of courage, a confrontation with something inherently wrong. And then there is the Bakaniko, the cat spirit, its movements elegant but loaded with danger. Cats, long associated with mystery and independence, become terrifying in the hands of folklore. A Bakaniko might speak human words, its voice carrying the weight of something ancient. It might dance in the moonlight or leap through the shadows, its presence an omen of death. But like all animal yokai, there is complexity beneath their menace. A Bakaniko is said to arise from a neglected or mistreated cat, its transformation fueled by years of pent-up anger and sorrow. These tales remind us that every creature, no matter how small, carries the potential for vengeance if wronged. The stories of these shape-shifting yokai walk the line between fear and awe, laughter and tragedy. They force us to look beyond the surface, to question what lies behind the familiar forms of animals we think we know. Each tale leaves a mark, a lingering sense that the rustle in the grass or the glint of eyes in the dark might be something more. Something watching. Something waiting. The sound of drums rolled through the mountain pass, low and rhythmic, like the pulse of the earth itself. A faint red glow seeped from the crags above, and with it came a smell of ash and iron. The villagers whispered of a demon who lived there, his hulking form crowned with horns sharp enough to split stone. Oni. The name alone made their hands tremble and their prayers quicken. Oni are the shadows of human rage and despair, grotesque and overwhelming. Towering figures with skin the color of fire or night, their tusked faces and cruel eyes speak of primal fear. They are often described as bringers of destruction, smashing through lives and landscapes with their massive clubs, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. Yet, for all their ferocity, their origins are eerily human. Some say Oni are born from souls so twisted by anger and hatred that they transform after death, cursed to roam the world in monstrous forms. Others tell of men who sought forbidden power, only to find themselves consumed by it, their humanity burned away. In these tales, the Oni are not just beasts but reminders of what happens when one gives in to the darkest parts of the soul. Yet not all Oni are purely evil. In rare stories, they protect villages from greater threats or teach lessons through harsh but just means. Even in their most terrible forms, they are complex, creatures born of pain, rage, and a world that failed them. The wind shifts, carrying the sharp cry of a bird. High above the mountains, where the sky meets the treetops, another kind of figure waits. The Tengu, with their sharp beaks and piercing eyes, seem to be watching everything and everyone at once. Some have the wings of birds, others the faces of men, but all of them radiate a fierce intelligence. Tengu are tricksters, but their tricks are not born of mischief, they are meant to humble. Proud monks and arrogant samurai are often the targets of their lessons, their illusions designed to strip away hubris and reveal the truth. A proud warrior might find himself lost in an endless forest, his every step taking him further from escape, until he admits his folly. Only then does the Tengu appear, offering wisdom and a way out. But their anger is just as legendary as their wisdom. Tengu are fiercely protective of sacred places, their wrath falling like lightning on those who dare to defile the mountains and temples under their watch. Legends speak of entire armies lost to Tengu, their banners shredded and their leaders fleeing in terror. Their presence is a reminder that nature itself is alive, and it will not be tamed. For all their fierceness, Tengu are also teachers. They are said to impart secret knowledge to those they deem worthy, training warriors and monks in skills no human could discover alone. The relationship is never easy. Tengu are proud and demanding, but those who endure their trials emerge stronger, wiser, and forever marked by the encounter. Then there is the silence, colder than any wind. It creeps through empty streets and abandoned houses, curling around the living like unseen hands. This silence belongs to the Urei, spirits who walk the earth with pale faces and eyes heavy with sorrow. The Urei are not ordinary ghosts. They are born from unfinished business, their deaths so violent or unjust that they cannot rest. A woman betrayed by her lover might return, her white burial kimono dragging along the ground as she searches for vengeance. Her hair flows like black water, her face both beautiful and terrifying. In one story, a samurai kills a servant girl in a fit of anger. Her spirit returns night after night, standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes locked on his. She doesn't speak or move, she doesn't need to. Her presence alone drives him to madness, the weight of his guilt pressing on him until he can no longer bear it. But not all yurei seek revenge. Some simply long for peace. A mother separated from her child in death might wander the earth, her faint cries carried on the wind as she searches. These spirits are tragic, their presence a plea for understanding rather than fear. What makes the yurei so haunting is their humanity. They were once people, their lives cut short, their stories interrupted. Their pain is raw, their sadness endless. They remind us of the fragility of life, the weight of love and loss. Each of these human-like yokai, the oni, the tengu, the yurei, exists on the edge of what it means to be human. They are driven by emotions we all know: anger, pride, sorrow, love. But in their forms, these emotions are amplified, transformed into something otherworldly. They challenge us to confront the extremes of our own nature, to see the beauty and terror in the shadows we carry. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps itself around you, pressing against your skin. In the corner stood an old lantern, its paper yellowed and edges frayed, the wooden frame worn smooth from years of use. It had sat there for decades, watching generations come and go. Tonight, under the pale glow of the moon, something about it felt different. The air around it seemed alive, tingling with anticipation. They say that objects, if cherished or neglected long enough, awaken. They remember the hands that touched them, the lives they witnessed, the laughter and sorrow they absorbed. After 100 years, they come to life. These are the tsukumagami, everyday things transformed into something extraordinary. A battered umbrella leans against the wall, its handle worn but sturdy. For decades, it sheltered a family from rain, sharing their quiet walks through puddles and storms. But when it was discarded, tossed into a dark corner and forgotten, something changed. One night, it stirred. The cloth rippled, the handle twitched, and a faint whisper filled the air. The umbrella's sorrow had grown teeth. Not all tsukumagami are born from neglect. Some are gifts, treasures passed down with care and love. A tea kettle might recall the warmth of countless hearths, the hands that lifted it, the tea it poured during long conversations. When it awakens, it does so with gratitude, its spirit gentle and curious. It moves lightly, almost shyly, eager to continue serving. But others are not so kind. A mirror, cracked and tarnished, reflects more than just the present. It shows the faces of those who once gazed into it, the hopes and fears they carried. If the mirror has been shattered or abandoned, it might awaken with anger, twisting its reflections into haunting visions. Those who look into it see not themselves, but fragments of something they'd rather forget. There's a story of a sewing needle, used for years by a widow to mend clothes for her children. It became her companion, a silent witness to her love and sacrifice. But when it finally broke, she cast it aside, too tired to notice its absence. A century later, the needle awakened, its spirit sharp and bitter. It wandered the house, pricking those who passed, as if to remind them of all it had endured. Tsukumagami are not bound by logic. They do not act as humans would expect. A sandal, split and discarded, might choose to wander the roads at night, its wooden steps echoing softly as it searches for a place to belong. A broken clock might start ticking again, its hands spinning wildly, counting moments it was denied. Yet, for all their strangeness, they are deeply tied to humanity. They reflect the way people treat the world around them, the reverence or carelessness, the love or neglect. A well-tended object awakens with warmth, a scorned one stirs with resentment. There's a tale of a farmer who inherited a set of tools from his father. He used them daily, repairing them with care, speaking to them as though they were friends. When thieves came to steal his harvest, the tools defended his home. The hammer struck, the scythe slashed, the hoe swung in furious arcs. In the end, the farmer was safe, and his tools returned to their quiet places, content in their loyalty. But not all awakenings are so noble. A paper lantern, used for years to light the way during festivals, might come to life with jealousy if replaced by newer, brighter lamps. It would wander through the night, its torn paper fluttering like wings, its glow faint but unyielding. Such a spirit might seek to remind its owners of the joy it once brought, flickering in doorways and alleyways as if to ask, "Do you remember me?" Tsukumagami remind us of the passage of time. They hold the weight of years, the accumulation of touch and memory. An old chest, filled with forgotten trinkets, might wake with a creak and a sigh, its spirit carrying the echoes of laughter and tears that once surrounded it. It doesn't seek revenge or understanding, it simply exists, a living reminder of what was. Not all objects awaken with clarity. Some are confused, their memories fragmented. A straw hat, worn thin by decades of sun and rain, might drift aimlessly, seeking the head it once shielded. It would hover in fields and paths, as though searching for something it couldn't name. These spirits are not frightening but sad, their presence a gentle ache that lingers in the air. Yet, there is beauty in their stories. The idea that even the most ordinary things carry meaning, that they hold pieces of the lives they've touched, is both humbling and profound. The comb that once smoothed a bride's hair, the pillow that cradled a child's dreams, the bell that called people home, each holds a world within it, waiting to be heard. Tsukumagami remind us to look at the things around us with new eyes. To treat even the smallest objects with care, for they may carry more than we realize. They are not just things, they are companions, witnesses, and sometimes, after 100 years, they are alive. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full, brimming with unseen eyes, hidden whispers, and the breath of ancient things. A breeze stirred the branches, soft and deliberate, as though the trees themselves had chosen to speak. Somewhere in the distance, water gurgled over stones, its rhythm oddly deliberate, almost like laughter. It was in these places, where the line between life and spirit blurred, that they stirred. The spirits of nature are not easily understood. They are not human, they do not follow human rules. A mountain does not grow angry in a way we can explain. A river does not mourn as we do. Yet, their presence is undeniable. They are as vast and enduring as the earth itself, their emotions woven into the winds and shadows. In the high peaks where the snow never melts, there is a being said to watch over travelers. It isn't kind in the way one might hope. It tests those who come too close, sending avalanches roaring down to crush the arrogant or unprepared. But those who approach with respect, who whisper prayers to the cold stones and step lightly on its slopes, might feel its presence differently, a warm current of air in the biting chill, a guiding light through the storm. This is the Yamanokami, the spirit of the mountain. Rivers, too, are alive, their waters restless and full of purpose. They twist and turn, carving paths through stone, carrying life and destruction in equal measure. A river yokai might take the form of a woman, her hair flowing like black water, her smile sharp and dangerous. She calls to those who wander too close, her voice as sweet as the lull of the current. Those who follow might find themselves slipping beneath the surface, the weight of the water pulling them into its eternal embrace. Yet, rivers can also be gentle. Fishermen tell stories of spirits who guide their nets, sending the largest fish swimming straight into their hands. Farmers speak of streams that seem to know when to overflow, nourishing crops at just the right moment. These spirits are as unpredictable as the water itself, kind one moment, merciless the next. In the forests, the air feels different. It hums with energy, a living pulse that shifts with every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs. There are tales of Kodama, spirits said to inhabit ancient trees. These spirits are quiet, almost shy, but their presence is felt in the stillness that surrounds their homes. To cut down a Kodama's tree is to invite ruin. Axes splinter, crops fail, and sickness spreads. It's not anger, it's balance, the forest reclaiming what was taken. Sometimes, the forest spirits take on more visible forms. A fox darting through the underbrush might not be just a fox. Its eyes gleam with intelligence, its movements too deliberate to be mere instinct. It pauses, watching, as though deciding whether to let you pass or lead you astray. In these moments, the forest feels alive in a way that is both beautiful and terrifying. Even the wind has a spirit. On quiet nights, when the air is still, you might hear a faint sound, like someone whispering your name. They call it the kamikaze, the divine wind. It rushes through the valleys and over the seas, carrying with it the voices of the unseen. Ships have been spared by its gusts, their sails filled at just the right moment to avoid disaster. But it can also destroy, tearing through villages with a fury that leaves nothing standing. In the heart of nature, there is a spirit for every element. The fire that burns in the hearth might flicker strangely, its flames dancing as though alive. The rain that falls on a dry field might feel heavier, as though it carries a message. Even the earth beneath your feet has a soul, shifting and rumbling to remind you of its presence. There is a story of a man who lived by the sea. Every morning, he would walk to the shore and pour a cup of sake into the waves, a silent offering to the spirit he believed lived there. One day, when a storm came and the waves rose higher than his house, he thought he was doomed. But the sea seemed to pause at his doorstep, the waters retreating as though sparing him. When the storm passed, he found a shell on his porch, smooth and iridescent, as though placed there deliberately. Nature yokai are not just spirits, they are forces. They remind us that we are small, that the world is vast and alive in ways we cannot control. They can be kind, offering guidance and protection, or they can be ruthless, sweeping away entire villages with a single wave or gust of wind. But above all, they demand respect. To live in harmony with them is to acknowledge their power and their presence. To forget them, to treat the world as though it is lifeless and ours to command, is to invite their wrath. They are the voice of the mountains, the cry of the rivers, the breath of the wind, and they are always watching. The vending machine blinked in the darkness, its soft glow casting long shadows across the deserted street. A faint hum came from its depths, almost imperceptible, as if it were breathing. No one was around. Yet, the machine whirred suddenly, its gears turning as a can of soda dropped into the tray. There were no coins inserted, no buttons pressed. The streetlight above flickered, and in the stillness, something unseen passed by. The city doesn't sleep. Its pulse beats through the neon signs and crowded alleyways, the rumble of trains and hum of air conditioners. But beneath the surface, past the humdrum and the chaos, something lingers. Yokai are not relics of the countryside. They've adapted, slipping into the cracks and crevices of modern life, unseen but undeniably present. There's an urban tale about a woman who boards the last train of the night. She's always alone, her face obscured by her long black hair. Passengers feel her presence before they see her, a cold draft that cuts through the heated carriage, a sense of being watched. She doesn't speak or move. When the train reaches the last stop, she vanishes, leaving behind a faint imprint on the seat, as though she was never there. In apartment buildings, stories circulate about the shadow in the elevator. It's there only in glimpses, reflected in the mirrors that line the walls. Some say it's a tenant who passed away, their spirit trapped between floors. Others believe it's something older, a yokai drawn to the confined space and the loneliness it finds there. Office workers tell of the copy machine that starts printing in the middle of the night. The pages are blank, except for faint smudges that, when held at the right angle, resemble faces. Janitors refuse to enter certain rooms after dark, speaking in hushed tones of whispers they can't locate and footsteps that echo on empty floors. Even the city's parks, places of respite amidst the concrete, are not free of their presence. There's a tale of a child's swing that moves by itself, creaking softly even when there's no wind. Parents warn their children not to play there after sunset, speaking of a yokai that lures the unsuspecting with the sound of laughter that isn't quite right. Then there are the lights. In the outskirts of the city, where the roads grow narrow and the streetlights are sparse, people sometimes see a faint glow hovering in the distance. It beckons, soft and inviting, leading them further and further until they find themselves lost. It's said to be a will-o'-the-wisp, a playful yet dangerous spirit that thrives on disorientation and fear. Technology, too, seems to have its own yokai. Phones that ring in the dead of night with no caller on the other end. Apps that glitch, showing distorted images that vanish as quickly as they appear. There's a rumor about a website that only appears at midnight, its content nonsensical yet strangely hypnotic. Those who visit it say they feel watched, their screens flickering as though something is looking back at them. In the bustling shopping districts, mannequins stand too still. Shopkeepers swear they've seen them shift positions when no one is looking, their glassy eyes glinting in the artificial light. Customers feel a chill when they pass by, a prickling at the back of their necks as though being followed. Even the seemingly mundane has a story. A stray cat that frequents the same corner every night, its eyes glowing unnaturally bright. A crack in the sidewalk that weeps water, even on the driest days. The scent of flowers, sweet and cloying, wafting through an alley with no visible source. The city's yokai are not confined to dark alleys and abandoned buildings. They move among the living, unnoticed yet always watching. A woman who smiles too widely at a crowded crosswalk, her teeth too sharp to be real. A man who offers directions but disappears before you can thank him. They blend in, their presence felt only in hindsight, a shiver that lingers long after they're gone. And then there's the sound of the city itself. The low hum of traffic, the distant murmur of voices, the rhythmic clatter of trains, sometimes it harmonizes into something almost melodic, almost human. But when you stop to listen, it fades, leaving behind only silence. The city is alive in ways its inhabitants rarely notice. Its yokai are not bound by the traditions of the past. They thrive on the anonymity of urban life, feeding off the solitude that exists even in the most crowded places. They are the shadows that stretch too long, the flickers in the corner of your eye, the strange occurrences that are dismissed as coincidences. In a world of steel and glass, where nature seems far away, they remind us that not everything can be explained. They are the city's secrets, whispered and felt but never truly seen. The moon hung low, casting its silver glow over the forest. A lone traveler hurried along the narrow path, his lantern flickering with every gust of wind. The night was eerily quiet, the usual chorus of insects and rustling leaves replaced by an unsettling stillness. Then, just ahead, he saw her, a woman dressed in a flowing kimono, her face partially obscured by the shadows. Her movements were graceful, almost otherworldly, and when she turned to face him, her eyes gleamed like molten gold. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice soft but carrying an edge that sent chills down his spine. He hesitated but nodded. She smiled, a delicate curve of her lips that seemed both kind and knowing. She offered to guide him, her footsteps barely audible as she led the way. But as they walked, the air grew colder, and he began to notice something strange. Her shadow, stretched long by the lantern light, flickered as if it had a life of its own. And then, for just a moment, he saw it, the unmistakable shape of a tail swishing behind her. Kitsune, the fox spirit, has always walked the line between friend and foe, between protector and trickster. In one story, they appear as loyal guardians, their presence a blessing. In another, they are cunning deceivers, weaving illusions so intricate that even the sharpest mind cannot see through them. The duality of their nature is what makes them unforgettable. There is a tale of a farmer who stumbled upon an injured fox in the woods. Its leg was caught in a hunter's trap, and its fur was matted with blood. Moved by compassion, the farmer freed the creature and carried it home, tending to its wounds with care. Days turned into weeks, and as the fox healed, it grew attached to its savior. But one night, the fox vanished. The farmer assumed it had returned to the wild, but a few days later, a woman arrived at his doorstep. She was strikingly beautiful, her hair the color of autumn leaves, her eyes as bright as amber. The woman told the farmer she had been watching over him and his family, repaying his kindness. Under her care, his crops flourished, and his fortune soared. Yet, rumors began to spread in the village. Some claimed the woman was too perfect, too unnatural. Suspicion turned to fear, and one fateful night, the villagers confronted her. As they shouted accusations, the woman wept. Then, with a final sorrowful glance at the farmer, she transformed back into a fox and disappeared into the forest, leaving behind a heartbroken man and an eerie silence that lingered for years. In other stories, kitsune are far less benevolent. A merchant once boasted of his wisdom, claiming no one could outwit him. He met a woman on the road who seemed humble and sweet, yet with a spark of mischief in her eyes. She invited him to her home, offering him a meal and lodging. But when he awoke the next morning, he found himself lying in the middle of an empty field, his belongings gone. The woman, of course, was nowhere to be found. Days later, the villagers whispered about a fox seen carrying a bundle of stolen goods in its jaws, its laughter echoing through the hills. And then, there are the kitsune who blur the line between mischief and malice. A young scholar, eager to gain wisdom, sought out a hermit known for his teachings. The hermit lived in a remote mountain temple, his knowledge said to be unparalleled. The scholar found the temple after weeks of searching, and the hermit welcomed him warmly. For months, the scholar studied, absorbing every lesson. But one night, he noticed something odd. The hermit's shadow did not match his form. It had too many tails, and its movements were too fluid. The scholar confronted the hermit, demanding to know the truth. The old man laughed, his form shimmering before shifting into that of a fox. "You've learned much," the kitsune said, "but knowledge comes at a price." The temple vanished, leaving the scholar alone on the mountainside. He returned to his village, wiser but haunted, for he could never be sure if what he learned was truth or illusion. Kitsune are also said to fall in love, their hearts as vulnerable as any humans. One legend speaks of a fox who took human form to marry a man she adored. She bore him children, her love for her family genuine and deep. But one day, the man discovered her secret, a glimpse of her tail when she thought no one was watching. Though he promised to keep her secret safe, the knowledge created a rift between them. She could sense his unease, the doubt that crept into his thoughts. Heartbroken, she left, her children crying after her as she disappeared into the woods. These tales are more than just stories, they are glimpses into the complexity of the kitsune's spirit. They remind us that intelligence can be a double-edged sword, that loyalty and deception can coexist, and that even the most otherworldly beings are not immune to love and loss. The fox spirit is a mirror, reflecting the best and worst of humanity, while remaining a creature of mystery and magic. Even today, in the quiet hours of the night, some claim to see the flicker of a tail disappearing into the shadows, or hear the soft laughter of a fox that's long since slipped away. The kitsune, ever watchful, remains a presence in our world, weaving stories that are never truly finished. In the heart of the countryside, where the forest grew thick and the streams sang softly as they wove between moss-covered rocks, a peculiar sound broke the silence. It wasn't the cry of a bird or the rustle of wind through the trees. It was laughter, deep, rolling, and full of mischief. A farmer paused in his work, gripping his hoe as he scanned the tree line. The sound came again, and then he saw it, a raccoon dog, or tanuki, perched on its hind legs, its round belly shaking with mirth. The farmer rubbed his eyes, certain he must be imagining things. But when he looked again, the tanuki had vanished, leaving only a trail of overturned buckets and scattered grain. Tanuki are not spirits, yet their antics carry a kind of magic that makes the world feel less ordinary. Their plump bodies and small, mischievous eyes belie an intelligence sharp enough to fool the cleverest of humans. Tales of their trickery have been whispered around hearths for centuries, each more ridiculous than the last. One story speaks of a monk walking alone at twilight, his mind preoccupied with prayers and thoughts of the divine. He did not notice the tanuki watching him from the underbrush. The creature tilted its head, its quick mind already forming a plan. Moments later, the monk heard a soft voice calling out, "Help! Someone, help me!" He turned, finding a young woman lying on the roadside, her face pale with distress. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her, offering his assistance. But as he reached out, the woman's form shimmered and dissolved into a burst of laughter. The tanuki stood in her place, its paw raised in a mocking salute before it darted into the shadows. But tanuki are not merely tricksters. Their ability to transform themselves into objects, people, or even entire buildings speaks to a deeper creativity. In another tale, a woodcutter trudging through the mountains came across a small shrine that seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. Curious, he approached, bowing respectfully before entering. The air inside was warm and fragrant, and before him lay offerings of food and drink. Exhausted from his journey, he hesitated only briefly before indulging in the feast. As he drifted off to sleep, he felt an odd sensation, as if the ground beneath him were shifting. He awoke to find himself lying in the middle of the forest, surrounded not by offerings but by leaves and acorns. A soft rustling caught his ear, and he turned just in time to see a tanuki disappearing into the brush, its laughter lingering in the air. Yet for all their mischief, tanuki are not cruel. They seem to possess an innate sense of justice, often punishing the greedy or arrogant while rewarding those who show kindness or humility. In one well-loved story, a poor couple struggling to make ends meet found themselves visited by a tanuki. At first, they feared it was another prank. But the tanuki offered them a strange gift, a pouch that, when opened, produced gold coins. The couple, overjoyed, used the gift sparingly, sharing their fortune with neighbors and never letting greed take hold of their hearts. Years later, when the pouch finally emptied, they found a note inside: "Your kindness is its own reward. Remember me, and you will never want for joy." The couple lived out their days in happiness, and though they never saw the tanuki again, they often felt as if they were being watched, protected by an unseen friend. Not all who encounter tanuki are so fortunate. A merchant once set out to claim a rare treasure hidden deep in the mountains. His greed was well known, and his methods ruthless. When he finally found the cave said to hold the treasure, he was met not by riches but by a charming stranger who offered to guide him. The stranger led him through dense thickets and treacherous cliffs, all the while spinning tales of the unimaginable wealth that awaited. But as the merchant grew impatient and demanded answers, the stranger's face began to change. Its features twisted and stretched until it was unmistakably a tanuki, its eyes gleaming with mischief. The creature burst into laughter, leaving the merchant stranded in the wilderness. Days later, he stumbled back to the village, his treasure unclaimed and his pride in tatters. Even today, tanuki are said to roam the countryside, their playful antics occasionally spilling into the towns and cities. Vendors might find their goods rearranged overnight, or a lone traveler might hear the sound of drums in the distance, only to find a tanuki beating its round belly in a rhythmic dance. These moments remind us that the world is full of surprises, that joy can come from the unexpected, and that laughter is sometimes the best response to life's absurdities. Tanuki, with their boundless energy and irrepressible humor, are more than just creatures of folklore. They are storytellers, performers, and occasional moralists, weaving tales that linger long after the laughter fades. To meet a tanuki, even briefly, is to glimpse the world through eyes unclouded by convention, where magic and mischief are just another part of the everyday. The ground trembled as if the earth itself feared what was coming. A shadow stretched across the narrow mountain path, growing larger with each heartbeat. Then came the sound, deep, guttural, like the growl of a storm gathering strength. The villagers huddled together, too terrified to look but unable to turn away. When it emerged, their worst fears took form: a towering figure with fiery eyes, jagged horns jetting from its head, and a mouth curled into a snarl that promised chaos. This was no man, no beast. It was an oni. Oni are creatures born from the darkness that lurks at the edge of human thought. They are the wrath that rises in a scorned heart, the hunger for destruction that even the noblest soul sometimes feels. Their enormous bodies and monstrous strength make them the stuff of nightmares, but their stories are more than simple tales of terror. Each horn, each claw, and each bellowing roar speaks of something deeper, something that lingers long after the last echoes fade. One story tells of an oni who terrorized a village nestled in the shadow of a great mountain. This oni was no mindless brute. It spoke with a voice like thunder and demanded offerings of food and riches. Those who refused faced its wrath: roofs torn from homes, fields left in ruin, and livestock scattered like leaves in a storm. But then, one night, a farmer's son decided he had had enough. He climbed the mountain with nothing but a flute in hand, his resolve as sharp as the cold wind biting at his face. When he reached the Oni's lair, he began to play, the soft, haunting melody carrying through the darkness. The Oni appeared, its massive frame blocking out the moonlight, its eyes glowing like coals. But it did not strike. Instead, it listened. The boy played until dawn, each note weaving a story of sorrow and defiance. When he stopped, the Oni spoke, its voice heavy with something that sounded almost like regret. "Your song has shown me the pain I cause," it said. "I will trouble your village no more." And with that, it vanished, leaving the boy to return a hero. Not all Oni are so easily swayed. Some are embodiments of raw destruction, their rage unquenchable. In these tales, they serve as reminders of what happens when humanity's darker impulses are left unchecked. A samurai once crossed paths with such an Oni, a beast so fearsome that entire armies had fled before it. The samurai, however, stood his ground. He fought not with anger or fear, but with a calm born of discipline. His sword struck true, and as the Oni fell, it whispered, "You have conquered not me, but the monster within yourself." There are whispers, too, of Oni who are not born evil but become so through suffering. These tales often begin with betrayal or unbearable loss. A kind-hearted woman, wronged by those she trusted, might find her grief twisting into fury, her body transforming into that of an Oni. Her horns would pierce the heavens, her cries would shatter the night, and she would wreak havoc not out of malice, but out of a pain too vast to bear. Even in their rage, such Oni evoke pity. They remind us that destruction often begins with a wound, and that behind every monster, there may lie a story of love turned to ashes. Oni also inhabit the spaces between justice and vengeance. In some legends, they are punishing spirits, sent to mete out retribution against those who have committed great wrongs. A corrupt official might wake to find his home surrounded by flames, the Oni's terrible visage visible through the smoke. These stories carry a grim satisfaction, a sense that even the powerful cannot escape the consequences of their actions. But the line between hero and monster is often blurred. There is a tale of an Oni who lived on a secluded island, feared by all for its ferocity. A brave warrior sailed to the island, determined to slay the beast. After a fierce battle, the Oni, mortally wounded, spoke its final words. "I guarded this island," it said. "I kept it safe from those who would harm it. Now it will fall to ruin." The warrior, struck by the realization that he had slain a protector, left the island, his victory hollow. Oni are not merely symbols of fear, they are mirrors, reflecting humanity's capacity for both destruction and redemption. They show us what we can become when consumed by anger, but they also hint at the possibility of change, of finding a way back from the brink. Their stories are filled with moments that leave the heart racing, a sudden roar in the night, a massive hand crashing through a door, but also with quieter, haunting scenes. The lonely figure of an Oni watching the world from its mountain lair, its eyes filled not with hatred, but with longing. Even as they tear through villages and haunt the edges of human imagination, Oni carry with them a strange, aching beauty. They are the monsters we fear and the monsters we understand, because in their rage and sorrow, we see echoes of ourselves. The wind howled through the ancient cedars, carrying with it an eerie, sharp cry that echoed off the cliffs. It was not the call of any bird known to these forests, nor the scream of a beast prowling the underbrush. It was something older, something that seemed woven into the very roots of the mountains. Travelers whispered of eyes watching from the shadows, keen, judgmental eyes that weighed your intentions like a scale. And if your heart was found wanting, those eyes would not hesitate to act. Tengu are the spirits of the mountain, guardians and tricksters whose presence commands both reverence and fear. Their forms are a curious blend of human and bird, their long beaks or sharp noses lending them an air of both wisdom and menace. Clad in robes that ripple like storm clouds and wielding fans said to summon whirlwinds, they inhabit a space between the divine and the earthly, the protector and the punisher. In one tale, a group of loggers ventured into the dense forest at the base of a sacred mountain. They laughed at the old warnings, at the shrines left by pilgrims to appease the spirits. But as the first tree fell to their saws, the forest seemed to come alive. Shadows moved against the light of day, circling above like restless vultures. One man, sensing the danger, begged the others to stop, but his words were drowned out by another crashing tree. Then they came. Figures leapt from the treetops, their robes flowing like wings. The loggers could not tell if they were men or beasts. A whirlwind ripped through the clearing, scattering tools and debris, and the loggers fled, leaving the trees to stand unscathed. The one who had pleaded for restraint found himself alone, the Tengu standing before him. Their leader stepped closer, its beak inches from his face, and spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "You honor this place. Go, and tell others to do the same." But not all stories paint them as protectors. Some speak of their trickery, their penchant for leading the arrogant astray. A proud warrior once declared he would scale a forbidden peak and claim its summit for his own glory. The villagers warned him of the Tengu, but he only laughed. As he climbed, the path grew steeper, the air thinner. Yet every time he thought he had reached the summit, he would find himself back at the base of the mountain, his strength sapped. Days passed, then weeks. When he was finally found, he was a shadow of the man who had set out, his pride shattered, his ambition humbled. And yet, there are those who seek the Tengu not to challenge them but to learn from them. Legends tell of monks who braved the forests in search of these spirits, hoping to gain their wisdom and martial skill. The Tengu, it is said, are masters of the sword and staff, their movements so swift and precise that they seem to flow like water. But their lessons are not given freely. They test the spirit as much as the body, demanding humility and respect before they will share their secrets. One such monk, a young and reckless soul named Ichiro, ventured into the mountains seeking revenge against a rival clan. He begged the Tengu to teach him the way of the blade, promising to honor them in return. The Tengu leader agreed but set him to tasks that seemed meaningless, carrying water, sweeping leaves, meditating for hours on end. Frustrated, Ichiro demanded to learn how to fight. The Tengu leader struck him down with a single motion, his staff moving so swiftly that Ichiro didn't even see it coming. "You are not ready," the spirit said. "Until you master yourself, you cannot master the sword." Humbled, Ichiro continued his training with renewed focus, and when he finally left the mountains, he no longer sought revenge but peace. Even now, the presence of the Tengu is felt in the forests and mountains of Japan. Their stories linger in the whisper of the wind through the trees and the sudden rustle of leaves when no one is near. They are the guardians who remind us of our place in the natural world, the tricksters who humble us when our pride grows too great, the warriors who teach that true strength lies not in domination but in balance. To hear the cry of a Tengu is to feel the weight of ancient wisdom and the wild, untamed power of the mountains. They are not bound by the rules of men, but live by a code that respects the harmony of life. And whether they appear as protectors, tricksters, or teachers, they leave a mark on all who encounter them, a reminder that the line between the human and the divine is often as thin as the edge of a blade. The house had stood for centuries, its paper screens weathered but intact, glowing softly in the pale moonlight. Inside, the air was still, thick with an unshakable sense of being watched. Not by the human eye, but by something older, something unseen yet all too aware. A faint rustle stirred one of the sliding shoji screens, though no breeze moved through the room. A traveler staying there for the night turned uneasily in their sleep, sensing the weight of invisible eyes upon them. When morning came, they would find the screen riddled with strange, blinking pupils that hadn't been there before. Mokumokurin is one of those yokai that doesn't strike with claws or teeth, but with an insidious, quiet malice. It hides in plain sight, lurking in broken or torn shoji screens, transforming gaps into watchful eyes. These eyes do not simply observe, they peer into the soul, judging, unsettling, perhaps revealing truths you'd rather remain hidden. Many who encounter Mokumokurin describe a lingering unease, a sense that no secret, no thought, is truly safe from its gaze. The danger with these yokai is not their physical threat, but the way they creep under the skin, making you question reality itself. The first encounter is often subtle, a fleeting movement in the corner of your vision, a shift in the texture of light that you can't explain. You glance at the screen, expecting to see the harmless wear and tear of age, only to meet dozens of unblinking, inhuman eyes staring back. And in that moment, your breath catches, your heart pounds, because these eyes are more than mere decoration, they are alive, watching, waiting. But Mokumokurin is not alone among these unseen threats. There are countless yokai whose power lies not in their size or strength, but in their ability to hide in the shadows of everyday life. Take the Zashiki Warashi, for instance, a spirit often unseen but whose presence is felt through small disturbances. A gentle laugh in an empty room, the inexplicable movement of objects, or even the sudden, eerie sound of footsteps in a place where no one should be. They say the Zashiki Warashi brings fortune to those it favors, but its departure heralds ruin. How can one hold onto something that cannot be grasped, cannot even be truly known? Then there is the Itsumaid, whose presence is foretold not by sight but by sound. A shrill, mournful cry pierces the night, growing closer, louder, until it becomes unbearable. But when you step outside, there is nothing. Nothing but the oppressive weight of something watching from just beyond the edge of your vision. Itsumaid is said to be a harbinger, a warning that tragedy or misfortune is near. What could be more terrifying than an unseen force that speaks not to harm you directly but to remind you of the inevitability of loss? These yokai challenge the way humans perceive the world. They thrive on ambiguity, slipping into the cracks between the known and the unknown. When a room feels too quiet, too still, their presence lingers in the silence. The air feels heavier, the shadows longer, and every creak of the floorboards seems like a deliberate choice. They inhabit moments of vulnerability, when you are alone, when you let your guard down, when the familiar becomes strange. Consider the stories of Akaname, a yokai that lurks in filth and decay. Rarely seen, it is said to come at night, its presence betrayed only by the faint sound of something licking grime from neglected surfaces. You may never see it, but you wake with a gnawing unease, a sense that the dirt in your life, both literal and metaphorical, has been touched by something unnatural. Akaname is not a monster you fight. It is a force that preys on neglect, feeding on what you have ignored. These yokai do not roar or lunge or demand attention. They whisper, they linger, they make their presence known in the spaces between certainty and doubt. You cannot confront them because they are not always there. Or perhaps they are, and you simply cannot perceive them. That is their greatest power, the ability to make you question your own senses, your own mind. There is something intimate about these invisible threats, something that feels like a violation. A tangible monster can be fought or fled from, but what do you do when the threat is a pair of eyes where there should be none, a laugh that echoes where no one stands? These yokai force you to confront not just their existence, but your own vulnerability, your inability to control the unseen forces that shape your world. Perhaps this is why the tales of such yokai persist, because they reflect a truth we all know but rarely face. That there are things we cannot see, cannot touch, but that shape our lives in profound ways. The tear in a paper screen, the laughter in an empty room, the cry in the night, these are reminders that the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary is thin, that the world is far stranger than it seems. The wind shifts. The shadows flicker. You glance at the shoji screen, just to be sure. The room felt still, almost unnaturally so. The faint flicker of a paper lantern cast soft shadows against the walls, and the faint scent of old wood filled the air. It wasn't the chill of the night that raised goosebumps, but the sense of being watched. The shoji screen by the corner seemed ordinary, worn with age, its delicate paper stretched thin over its wooden frame. But then, something shifted. A ripple in the stillness. A flicker of movement. And there, in the soft glow, an eye opened, a single, unblinking eye, staring straight through to the depths of the soul. This is the presence of Mokumokurin, a yokai that inhabits torn paper screens. Its power is not in violence or chaos, but in its quiet, unsettling gaze. When it appears, it does not announce itself with sound or fury. It simply watches. The weight of its stare feels as though it can peel back the layers of a person's being, exposing everything they'd rather keep hidden. The more you notice its eyes multiplying across the screen, the harder it becomes to look away. The harder it becomes to breathe. Mokumokurin is just one of many yokai that haunt the spaces between what we see and what we feel. They are not creatures of grand gestures, but masters of subtlety, weaving themselves into the unnoticed corners of everyday life. Their power lies in the unease they bring, and the way they make the mundane feel alien and unsafe. Consider the Zashiki Warashi, the unseen spirit of a child that resides in homes. You may never see its form, but its presence lingers in soft laughter that seems to echo from nowhere. A room once filled with light feels dimmer when it chooses to leave. Those who hear its playful giggles or feel its touch in the air say it brings luck, until it decides to vanish, taking the fortune with it and leaving only despair in its wake. What could be more terrifying than the loss of something you never realized you had? Other yokai reveal themselves through absence rather than presence. The Itsume does not appear at first. Instead, its approach is heralded by a haunting, piercing cry that slices through the silence of the night. It's a sound that chills to the bone, growing louder, more unbearable, as if the scream itself is a warning of what's to come. Yet when you rush outside to confront it, there is nothing. Nothing but the sense of something just beyond reach, waiting for its moment to strike. And then there are the invisible yokai that prey on human neglect. Akaname, a spirit of filth, creeps into dirty homes, licking away grime with its long, grotesque tongue. It doesn't harm its victims outright, but leaves them with an overwhelming sense of shame, a reminder of what they've let fester in their lives. You might never see it, but its presence lingers in the uncomfortable feeling that something has been disturbed, something unclean. These yokai thrive in silence, in moments of vulnerability. They hide in the shadows of our perception, slipping between what is and what might be. Their attacks are not physical but emotional, worming their way into thoughts and fears. They turn ordinary objects into vessels of unease, an open door that wasn't ajar before, a misplaced item you were certain you left elsewhere. Was it your imagination? Or were you just not quick enough to catch the movement at the edge of your vision? It is the ambiguity that makes these yokai so powerful. They never fully reveal themselves, leaving you to wrestle with your own mind. Is it paranoia, or is it real? The Mokumokurin's eyes seem to follow wherever you move. The Zashiki Warashi's laughter feels both playful and ominous. The Itsume's cry rings in your ears long after it has faded into silence. You tell yourself it's nothing, that there's a rational explanation. But doubt lingers. Perhaps that is why these unseen yokai are some of the most feared. A demon can be fought, a ghost confronted, but how do you fight what you cannot see? How do you resist something that might not even be there? They force us to confront the fragility of our senses, the gaps in our understanding of the world. They thrive in the moments when our confidence falters, when the boundary between the real and the imagined begins to blur. Even their names carry weight. Mokumokurin, the many eyes, turns the simple act of repairing a torn screen into a defense against the unknown. Zashiki Warashi, the parlor child, reminds us to honor the unseen spirits that may dwell in our homes. Akaname, the filth licker, is a haunting manifestation of the consequences of neglect. Each name carries a story, a warning, and a reminder that the mundane holds mysteries we often ignore. They may not strike with claws or fangs, but their touch is no less chilling. It is the brush of an unseen hand, the whisper of a presence that shouldn't exist, the feeling that something, or someone, is just out of reach. And when you finally turn to look, the only thing you find is your own reflection, staring back with wide, frightened eyes. The temple bell rang low and solemn, its sound rippling through the evening air like a heartbeat. Lanterns flickered in the twilight, their glow casting long shadows across the stone steps. In the stillness, there was a hum, a vibration that seemed to pulse in the very ground. It wasn't just the sound of the bell, it was something deeper, older, alive. The priests moved slowly, their chants rising and falling like waves, carrying a melody that seemed to echo in places unseen. Here, in this sacred space, the boundary between the world of humans and the realm of spirits felt thin. You could almost feel the yokai stirring, their presence woven into the fabric of the rituals. For in Shinto and Buddhism, yokai were not just beings of folklore, they were part of the same spiritual thread that connected all things. They weren't intrusions into the divine but reflections of it, beings that embodied the fears, desires, and mysteries of existence. Shinto, with its reverence for nature and its countless kami, provided a home for many yokai. The ancient forests, towering mountains, and rushing rivers were not mere landscapes, they were alive with spirits, each one carrying its own essence. Some kami were benevolent, protectors of the land and its people, while others, darker and more restless, took on forms that humans would come to know as yokai. When the wind howled through the trees, when the river surged with unrelenting force, these were not mere accidents of nature. They were the voices of something sacred, something untamed. It was in Shinto shrines that people first began to seek answers to the mysteries of the yokai. Offerings were left at altars, prayers whispered into the night. The foxes that roamed the temple grounds, their golden eyes glowing in the lantern light, were they just animals, or were they messengers of Inari, the kami of rice and prosperity? In the stillness of the shrine, the question lingered. The boundary between kami and yokai blurred, and the line between protector and trickster dissolved into a single truth: the world was alive in ways no one could fully understand. Buddhism brought a different perspective, one that looked beyond the physical world to the cycles of suffering, karma, and enlightenment. Yokai, in the Buddhist view, were not just spirits of nature or shadows in the night, they were manifestations of human struggles. The Oni, with their fearsome horns and monstrous strength, were not born of chaos but shaped by the weight of sin and unfulfilled desires. They weren't just monsters to fear, they were warnings, reminders of what could happen when anger and greed consumed the soul. In Buddhist temples, the yokai were not simply banished but confronted. Rituals of exorcism weren't just about driving out spirits, they were about purifying the heart, finding balance in a world filled with suffering. The Tengu, those enigmatic bird-like beings of the mountains, were both feared and revered. They were warriors and guardians, but they also symbolized pride, the kind of arrogance that could lead even the most devoted monk astray. To face a Tengu was to face one's own flaws, to acknowledge the shadows within. Even the restless Yurei, the spirits of the dead who lingered in torment, found a place within Buddhist teachings. Their cries weren't dismissed as mere hauntings, they were calls for compassion. The prayers offered for their peace weren't just acts of kindness, they were acts of redemption, not just for the spirits, but for the living. In the glow of temple candles, as monks chanted sutras into the night, you could feel the weight of those lost souls lifting, carried on the rhythm of the words. The interplay between Shinto and Buddhism gave yokai lore its depth, its complexity. It wasn't just about fear or wonder, it was about connection. The rituals, the prayers, the stories, they weren't just for the spirits. They were for the people, a way to make sense of a world that often felt vast and incomprehensible. The yokai became mirrors, reflecting not only the mysteries of the natural world, but the struggles of the human heart. In every whispered prayer, every flickering lantern, there was an understanding that yokai were not separate from the sacred. They were threads in the same tapestry, reminders that light and shadow were not enemies but partners in the dance of existence. The temple bell rang again, its sound carrying not just through the air but through the soul, a call to remember the spirits that walk beside us, unseen but ever present. The lanterns swayed in the breeze, their soft glow painting the night in hues of gold and crimson. The sound of drums echoed through the narrow streets, each beat like the pulse of the earth itself. A procession moved forward, people dressed in elaborate costumes, their faces hidden behind masks of foxes, demons, and spirits. There was a reverence in their steps, a rhythm that spoke of stories older than memory, as if the yokai themselves walked among them. Festivals honoring yokai were not mere celebrations. They were offerings, bridges between the seen and the unseen, a way for humans to acknowledge the spirits that shared their world. The laughter of children mingled with the solemnity of ritual, the two entwined like the threads of a tapestry. In these moments, the ordinary dissolved, and the streets became a stage where the mystical and the mundane performed as one. At dusk, a hush fell over the crowd. A figure appeared, its silhouette framed against the light of the setting sun. It was a performer dressed as a Tengu, his mask carved with sharp angles and gleaming eyes. He moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, his arms sweeping through the air as if summoning the winds of the mountains. The crowd watched, spellbound, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames of countless candles. This wasn't just entertainment, it was an invocation, a dance to honor the guardian spirits who watched over the forests. Further down the street, stalls lined the path, their colorful banners swaying in the night. Vendors called out, offering charms and talismans said to ward off mischievous yokai or invite their blessings. Children clutched wooden fox masks, their laughter ringing out as they chased each other through the crowd. An elder sat by one of the stalls, her hands deftly folding paper into tiny cranes. She whispered to those who approached, telling them that these cranes carried prayers to the kami and the yokai alike, a gesture of harmony between worlds. In the temple courtyard, the air was heavy with the scent of incense. Priests moved among the altars, their robes flowing like water. Offerings of rice, sake, and fruit were placed with care, each item a symbol of gratitude. The flames of the altar fire danced, their light casting shadows that flickered like living things. The priests chanted, their voices weaving a melody that seemed to seep into the stones of the temple itself. It was as if the yokai were listening, their presence felt in the rustle of leaves and the crackle of fire. Some festivals were marked by grand displays of light. Entire villages would come alive with lanterns shaped like mythical creatures, dragons, foxes, and even the playful tanuki. These glowing figures paraded through the streets, their light cutting through the darkness like a beacon. The air buzzed with excitement as people followed the procession, their footsteps echoing the rhythm of the taiko drums. It was a celebration of unity, a moment where humans and spirits seemed to move as one. But not all yokai festivals were joyous. In certain regions, rituals were performed to appease restless spirits, those whose anger or sorrow lingered in the world. These ceremonies were solemn affairs, marked by silence and prayer. Families gathered at shrines, lighting candles and offering prayers for protection. The air was thick with emotion, a quiet acknowledgement of the fragility of life and the mysteries of death. These rituals carried a weight that was palpable, a reminder that the yokai were not just stories but echoes of human fears and hopes. One of the most breathtaking moments of these festivals was the release of floating lanterns. People would gather by rivers and lakes, each holding a lantern inscribed with their wishes or messages to the spirits. As the lanterns were set adrift, they bobbed gently on the water, their light reflecting in the ripples. The sight was hauntingly beautiful, a sea of tiny flames drifting into the night. It was said that the yokai guided these lanterns, carrying the prayers of the living to the unseen world. The festivals also gave voice to ancient stories, passed down through generations. Elders would sit by the fires, their voices rising and falling as they recounted tales of kitsune who fell in love with humans, of oni who found redemption, and of tsukumagami who brought life to forgotten objects. The listeners, young and old, leaned in close, their faces illuminated by the glow of the flames. In these stories, the yokai were not just creatures of mischief or menace, they were beings of depth, their lives intertwined with the struggles and joys of humanity. As the night wore on, the festivities reached their climax. Fireworks lit up the sky, their colors bursting like stars. The crowd cheered, their voices blending with the crackle of the explosions. Beneath the spectacle, there was a deeper resonance, a recognition of something eternal. The yokai, whether feared or revered, were part of this world, their presence woven into the fabric of life. When the final drumbeat faded and the last lantern flickered out, the streets fell quiet once more. The people began to disperse, their laughter and chatter replaced by the soft rustle of footsteps. But the spirits remained, lingering in the shadows and the whispers of the wind. They had been honored, their stories told, their presence acknowledged. And in that silence, there was a sense of peace, a fragile, beautiful harmony between the human and the otherworldly. The brush glided over the paper, the ink leaving trails that twisted and curled into shapes that seemed to breathe. A fox's sly grin emerged from the strokes, its tails flicking playfully, as if the creature itself had paused mid-transformation. The artist leaned back, inspecting the image, and then added a pair of glowing eyes to the background, watchful, unnerving, alive. In that moment, the ordinary world was replaced by something far more vivid, a place where spirits lingered and yokai roamed freely through the folds of imagination. In the Edo period, these moments of artistic creation gave birth to some of the most iconic images of yokai. Artists, armed with their brushes and boundless curiosity, translated whispers of folklore into vivid depictions on delicate woodblock prints. These prints, ukiyo-e, were more than just art. They were windows into a world teeming with spirits and specters, a world that felt both far away and startlingly close. Each piece told a story, capturing the heart of the yokai it portrayed. In one print, a ghostly woman with flowing hair and hollow eyes hovered in the shadows, her translucent form blending with the night. Her expression was one of sorrow, a silent plea that seemed to reach through the paper itself. In another, an oni bared its sharp teeth, its muscular form towering over a helpless village. Yet there was something almost human in its gaze, a flicker of regret, a trace of a story untold. These prints were not created in isolation. They emerged from bustling streets where storytellers spun tales of mischievous foxes and vengeful spirits, their words weaving a tapestry of fear, wonder, and awe. The artists listened, their minds capturing the essence of these stories, and then translated them into lines and colors. The yokai that had once lived only in the shadows of imagination now stared boldly back from the pages, daring anyone to look away. The attention to detail was mesmerizing. In the depiction of a tengu, every feather was rendered with care, each line suggesting the power of its wings. The sharp beak and piercing eyes conveyed a sense of authority, a reminder of its role as both a protector and a trickster. These prints brought the yokai to life, not as distant myths, but as beings that could step out of the artwork and into the world at any moment. Mokumokurin, the spirit of the paper screen, found its eerie presence immortalized in one such print. The screen itself seemed alive, its countless eyes gazing out with an unsettling awareness. The folds of the paper were captured with such precision that one could almost hear it rustling in the wind. The effect was haunting, a reminder of how even the most mundane objects could be transformed by the touch of the unseen. For those who viewed these prints, the experience was transformative. They became more than mere observers, they were participants in a shared mythology. A fisherman might see a depiction of an yumabozu, the spirit of the sea, and recall a stormy night when the waves seemed alive with malice. A child might clutch a print of a playful tanuki and feel both fear and fascination, wondering if the creature might be hiding in the nearby woods. The ukiyo-e artists were storytellers in their own right, but their medium allowed them to transcend words. They used bold colors and intricate patterns to convey emotion, creating scenes that were as much about feeling as they were about form. A stormy sky above a mountain hinted at the wrath of a yokai, while the soft glow of lanterns in a village suggested a fragile peace. These details invited viewers to linger, to look closer, to lose themselves in the world the artist had created. One artist, Katsushika Hokusai, became renowned for his ability to capture the essence of yokai. In his prints, the spirits were not merely beings to be feared, they were complex, with personalities that defied simple categorization. His work on yokai often blended humor with horror, as in the case of a mischievous kitsune caught mid-prank or a startled farmer confronting a tsukumagami that had once been his beloved teapot. But it wasn't just the yokai themselves that were brought to life, it was the world they inhabited. Forests became places of enchantment, their twisted branches suggesting hidden secrets. Rivers shimmered with an otherworldly glow, hinting at spirits lurking just beneath the surface. Even the humble village streets, with their flickering lanterns and winding paths, seemed infused with magic, as if the yokai might appear around the next corner. These prints found their way into the hands of merchants, farmers, and samurai alike. They were displayed in homes, traded among friends, and collected by those who sought to connect with the mysteries of the unseen. For many, these images were a source of comfort, a reminder that the yokai, for all their power and unpredictability, were also part of the world's natural order. They were beings to respect, to honor, and perhaps, to understand. As the popularity of ukiyo-e grew, so too did the yokai they depicted. Stories that had once been whispered in the quiet of rural villages now reached the bustling cities, carried by the art that immortalized them. The prints became a cultural phenomenon, shaping how generations viewed the spirits that shared their world. Through their art, the yokai gained a voice that continues to resonate, even centuries later. And so, the ink-stained hands of those artists left behind more than just images on paper. They created a bridge between the human and the otherworldly, a connection that could be felt with every brushstroke, every detail, every haunting gaze. To stand before one of these prints was to feel the presence of the yokai themselves, watching, waiting, and perhaps remembering a time when their stories were brought to life with such care. The stage was cloaked in shadows, the air heavy with a tension that sent shivers down the spines of the audience. A single drumbeat echoed, low and resonant, followed by the faint sound of a flute that carried a mournful melody. Slowly, the figure emerged, a ghostly woman draped in white, her face painted in icy pallor, her movements unnervingly slow. The audience held their breath as her voice, haunting and otherworldly, filled the silent space, recounting a tale of betrayal, sorrow, and vengeance. Kabuki and No, the timeless theaters of Japan, brought yokai to life in a way that no other art form could. On those stages, spirits and demons became flesh, their stories unfolding with a raw, visceral power that left audiences spellbound. The performers moved with deliberate grace, their gestures imbued with meaning, their masks and costumes transforming them into creatures of another world. In those moments, the line between actor and yokai blurred, and the theater itself seemed to pulse with an ancient, untamed energy. In the heart of a No performance, the stage was stripped bare, just a wooden platform and the rhythmic cadence of drums and strings. It was simplicity that gave way to profound complexity, a space where yokai could step forward, their stories told through a single flick of the wrist, a tilt of the head. A kitsune, caught between its animal and human forms, would prance across the stage, its movements sharp and cunning, its mask revealing a sly smile. The audience could feel its playfulness but also its cunning, as if the fox itself had taken over the performer. The masks were more than just props, they were conduits to the otherworld. A mask of an oni, painted with snarling teeth and bulging eyes, was not just an accessory, it became the demon itself, its anger and power radiating from the performer's every movement. When the actor playing the oni roared, stomping their feet with earth-shaking force, the audience could feel the beast's wrath. Yet there were quieter moments, too, when the mask's unchanging expression seemed to tell stories of pain and regret, of a humanity lost but not forgotten. Kabuki, with its vibrant colors and dramatic flair, took these stories and magnified them. The performers, resplendent in elaborate costumes that shimmered under the stage lights, commanded every corner of the theater. A scene might begin with laughter, a tanuki playing tricks on an unsuspecting villager, its transformations met with gasps and applause. But as the play progressed, the mood would shift, the music growing darker, the tanuki's tricks revealing a deeper truth. By the time the final act arrived, the audience was left questioning whether they should laugh or weep, their hearts tangled in the duality of the mischievous spirit. The influence of yokai on these performances went beyond mere entertainment. They became a mirror to the audience's own fears, hopes, and questions about the world. In one play, a yurei, a vengeful ghost, might haunt a village, her cries echoing the pain of unfulfilled love. In another, a tengu might challenge a samurai, forcing him to confront his arrogance and pride. These stories were not just about the supernatural, they were about humanity, about the choices people make and the consequences they face. The audiences, seated on tatami mats or perched in wooden balconies, were not mere spectators. They were drawn into the stories, their imaginations filling in the spaces that the performances left open. When the kitsune danced, they saw its tails flicker, even if the stage showed none. When the yurei wept, they could almost feel her tears, cold and wet against their own skin. And when the oni roared, their hearts pounded with the fears that the demon might leap off the stage and into their world. But perhaps the most striking element of these performances was their ability to shift emotions with breathtaking precision. A kabuki play might begin with a boisterous festival, the stage alive with laughter and music. Performers in bright costumes would dance and twirl, their joy infectious. Yet, just as the audience began to feel at ease, the lights would dim, and the sound of the taiko drum would grow louder, its rhythm steady and ominous. The laughter would fade, replaced by an uneasy silence, as a yokai emerged from the shadows, its presence commanding the stage. The actors themselves were masters of transformation, their training so rigorous that they seemed almost superhuman. In one moment, an actor might portray a timid villager, their shoulders hunched and voice trembling. In the next, they would don the mask of an oni, their posture towering and menacing, their voice booming with unearthly power. This ability to shift between the human and the supernatural was at the heart of these performances, a testament to the performer's skill and dedication. The influence of yokai on kabuki and no was not limited to their stories, it was embedded in the very fabric of the performances. The music, the costumes, the choreography, all were designed to evoke the spirit of these beings. The sound of the shamisen, plucked with delicate precision, could mimic the laughter of a kitsune or the mournful wail of a yurei. The costumes, layered and intricate, transformed performers into creatures that seemed to step directly out of folklore. Even the staging, with its careful use of light and shadow, created an atmosphere where the yokai could thrive. For those who witnessed these performances, the experience was unforgettable. They left the theater with their hearts still pounding, their minds replaying the scenes over and over. They saw the world differently, their eyes catching glimpses of yokai in the rustling of leaves, the flicker of lanterns, the creak of an old wooden floor. The stories they had seen were not confined to the stage, they lived on in the memories of the audience, growing and evolving with each retelling. In the dim glow of the theater, where the boundaries between the seen and unseen blurred, the yokai found their voice. They roared and whispered, laughed and wept, their presence as real as the actors who portrayed them. And in those moments, the audience didn't just watch, they felt. They felt the weight of a kitsune's cunning, the sorrow of a yurei's lament, the power of an oni's rage. And as the final curtain fell, they carried those emotions with them, the echoes of the yokai lingering long after the stage had emptied. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light spilling across the delicate brushstrokes of ink on paper. The writer's hand trembled slightly as they penned the final lines of a story that had haunted them for nights. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest sound. Was it laughter, or just the rustling of leaves? In that moment, the boundary between the words on the page and the world outside seemed to vanish, as if the yokai themselves had emerged from the ink, ready to tell their own tale. Classical literature has long been a sanctuary for the stories of yokai, their forms and emotions etched into the hearts of readers through the centuries. These creatures were not just figments of imagination, they were alive in the words of poets and authors who sought to capture the fleeting essence of a world teetering between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Their stories carried whispers of fear, wonder, and a longing to understand the unknown. In one such text, a traveler recounts a chilling night spent in the mountains, the only light coming from his flickering lantern. As the wind grew colder and the path more treacherous, he stumbled upon a strange figure, a woman with long, flowing hair and eyes that glowed like embers. She spoke in riddles, her voice like the rustling of autumn leaves, before vanishing into the mist. The traveler's account, rich with detail and trembling with unease, left readers questioning whether the woman was a trick of his weary mind or something far more sinister. Poetry brought a different perspective, weaving yokai into the fabric of nature itself. A haiku might speak of a kitsune's paw prints in the snow, leading nowhere, as if the fox had danced into existence only to fade away again. Another poem might describe the soft, mournful cry of a yurei on a still summer night, her sorrow lingering in the humid air. These verses, though simple, held immense power, their brevity leaving space for the imagination to wander. Readers could feel the presence of the yokai, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments that resonated deeply. The tales of Oni, fierce and relentless, often served as moral warnings. In one story, an arrogant samurai boasted of his strength, challenging any foe to face him. He awoke one night to the sound of heavy footsteps, the ground shaking with each step. Before him stood an Oni, its eyes burning with rage, its claws sharp enough to cut through steel. The battle that followed was fierce, but the samurai's arrogance proved his downfall. As the Oni vanished into the dawn, the lesson was clear: pride without humility would invite destruction. Other stories focused on the gentler, more enigmatic yokai. The tale of a Tengu mentoring a young warrior, teaching him not only the art of combat but also the importance of balance and self-control, became a beloved narrative. The Tengu, though initially feared, revealed a wisdom that transcended human understanding, its lessons lingering in the minds of readers long after the final page. Perhaps the most haunting texts were those that left questions unanswered. A fisherman returns home to find his wife transformed into a Mujina, her face smooth and featureless, her silence deafening. A scholar stumbles upon a library of books that write themselves, their pages filled with the voices of spirits long gone. These stories didn't provide neat resolutions. Instead, they invited readers to sit with the discomfort of the unknown, to ponder the mysteries that yokai represented. The writers themselves often seemed to teeter on the edge of reality and illusion. They described moments when their ink brushes moved as if guided by an unseen hand, the stories spilling out faster than they could comprehend. It was as if the yokai had chosen them, whispering their tales into the ears of those who were willing to listen. These authors and poets became vessels, their words carrying the weight of centuries-old myths and emotions too vast to confine to a single lifetime. Even the physical texts bore traces of the supernatural. Some manuscripts were said to be cursed, their ink refusing to dry, smudging endlessly as if the yokai within refused to be confined. Others carried strange marks, footprints too small to belong to a human, claw-like scratches on the edges of pages. These details, whether real or imagined, only added to the allure of the stories, drawing readers closer to a world that felt both distant and immediate. And yet, beneath the layers of fear and awe, there was a sense of connection. The yokai in these stories were not just monsters or spirits, they were reflections of human emotions, magnified and given form. A Kitsume's trickery mirrored the complexities of trust and betrayal. A Yuriai's sorrow echoed the weight of unspoken regrets. An Oni's rage burned with the fire of injustices that could not be undone. Through their stories, readers found pieces of themselves, their own fears and desires woven into the tapestry of yokai lore. The texts themselves became treasures, passed down through generations, their pages worn thin by countless hands. Families gathered around lanterns to hear the tales recited, their shadows flickering on the walls like yokai come to life. Scholars studied them with reverence, their interpretations adding new layers to the myths. And poets, inspired by the timeless beauty of these stories, continued to write, their verses carrying the voices of the yokai into the future. As the ink dried on the final page, the stories didn't end. They lingered in the minds of those who read them, their words alive with the energy of the unseen. The yokai, ever-present yet elusive, found a home in literature and poetry, their essence immortalized in the delicate strokes of a brush and the rhythm of a well-chosen word. And through those words, they reached out, inviting readers into their world, not to explain, but to feel, to wonder, and to dream. The screen flickered to life, casting an ethereal glow across the darkened room. There, in the heart of the story, a Kitsume's golden eyes gleamed with mischief as she shifted seamlessly between forms, her laughter like a song woven with secrets. For a moment, she was human, her hand brushing against the protagonist's shoulder, a silent promise of friendship or betrayal. Then, with a swirl of shimmering light, she was a fox, her fur glinting under a pale moon. The audience held their breath, captivated by the dance of the mystical and the mundane. In the world of anime, manga, and cinema, yokai have risen like forgotten stars, their brilliance lighting up the imagination of a new generation. They are no longer confined to ancient scrolls or whispered stories, they leap from vibrant panels and frames, their essence reimagined but never lost. Their resurgence isn't just a retelling, it's a celebration, a reminder that even in a world driven by technology, the old spirits still have a place. A quiet scene in a manga might show a lone tanuki sitting by a river, its shape indistinct, its purpose unclear. Its eyes hold a glimmer of humor, as if it knows a secret the reader does not. The page turns, and suddenly, the tanuki transforms, its playful trickery sending the characters into chaos. But beneath the laughter, there's a thread of melancholy, an unspoken yearning for a simpler time, when humans and yokai might have shared the same paths without fear. In anime, the yokai often become something more, symbols of identity, conflict, and connection. One might see an Oni who fights not out of malice but out of desperation, its raw strength a mask for its inner turmoil. A Tengu might stand at the edge of a cliff, gazing at the horizon, a silent protector of a forest that humans have forgotten to honor. The stories may be fantastical, but they carry the weight of real emotions, loneliness, hope, and the eternal struggle to find one's place in a changing world. Then there are the hauntingly beautiful moments that linger long after the credits roll. A young boy stares into the reflection of a pond, only to see the face of a yokai staring back, its expression unreadable. The lines blur. Are they friends or foes? Does it matter? These stories don't just entertain, they stir something deep within, awakening an ancient awareness that perhaps the yokai have always been with us, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. Cinema, too, has embraced the magic of yokai, weaving their myths into unforgettable visuals. A director might use shadows and light to hint at the presence of a yurei, its form barely visible yet impossible to ignore. In another film, a bustling city scene might suddenly slow, the camera focusing on a single figure, a kitsune slipping unnoticed through the crowd, its human guise perfect, save for a tail that flicks for just a moment before vanishing. These details, small yet deliberate, create an atmosphere that feels alive, as if the yokai themselves are watching. The use of modern technology has only amplified their presence. Animated flames dance in the eyes of an oni, their brightness so vivid it feels as though they could burn through the screen. The rustle of wind becomes the whisper of a tengu's wings, so real it raises goosebumps. These mediums breathe new life into ancient myths, blending tradition with innovation in a way that feels both timeless and fresh. And yet, even as they adapt to new forms, the yokai retain their essence. A manga artist might draw inspiration from centuries-old woodblock prints, their lines echoing the style of the Edo period while adding their own flair. An anime writer might weave in folktales passed down through generations, their dialogue capturing the cadence of a story told by a fire. These connections to the past ensure that the yokai remain true to themselves, even as they evolve to fit modern narratives. Some of the most powerful portrayals are those that don't shy away from the complexity of yokai. They are not just monsters or allies, they are layered, their motivations as intricate as the patterns on a tanuki's fur or the feathers of a tengu. One story might show a yokai helping a lost child find their way home, only to reveal that it did so out of loneliness, yearning for the companionship it can never truly have. Another might show a fierce battle between human and spirit, only to end with an uneasy truce, both sides realizing they are not so different after all. The audience, too, becomes part of this dynamic. Watching an anime or reading a manga, they find themselves asking questions they hadn't considered before. What does it mean to be human? Can we coexist with what we don't understand? These stories don't just entertain, they provoke thought, encouraging viewers and readers to see the world through new eyes. And in this resurgence, the yokai become more than characters, they become bridges. They connect the past to the present, the mythical to the tangible, the human to the otherworldly. They remind us that even in the hustle of modern life, there is room for wonder, for mystery, for the unseen forces that shape our world. Whether they are mischievous, fearsome, or heartbreakingly kind, the yokai in modern media hold a mirror to our own souls, reflecting the best and worst of what it means to exist. As the screen fades to black, the echoes of their stories remain. The flicker of a kitsune's tail, the glint of an oni's eye, the silent flight of a tengu through the night sky, they linger, not just as images, but as feelings. And for those who dare to look closer, they are more than just stories. They are called to remember, to believe, and to feel the magic that has always been just beneath the surface. The wind howled through the trees, a cold, biting force that seemed to have a life of its own. The snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, turning the world into a swirling white abyss. In the distance, the faintest whisper could be heard, as if something was moving just out of sight, its presence known only by the tremor in the air. No human would dare venture too far into this wilderness. The harsh, unforgiving land held secrets, stories older than time, of creatures that lurked just beyond the edge of sight. In Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost island, the land is shaped by extremes, frigid winters, and rugged, wild beauty. And with the land comes legends, whispered in the cold nights by those who live close to nature, where the shadows are long and the spirits are many. There are creatures here that are different, born from the land's isolation and its raw, unyielding power. These yokai are not the mischievous, playful spirits found further south. They are something else entirely, more elusive, more primal, their stories full of a quiet, haunting power that will send shivers down your spine long after the wind stops howling. It was said that in the quiet, untouched corners of Hokkaido's forests, there existed a creature known as the Rokurokubi, a being with the ability to stretch its neck to terrifying lengths. By day, it appeared as a normal human, blending in with the locals. But when night fell, and the shadows crept closer to the ground, it would reveal its true nature. Its neck would twist and stretch, reaching out to snatch up anything unlucky enough to be in its path. But even more unsettling than its appearance was the feeling it gave, a sense of being watched, of being prey in a world where humans were no longer at the top of the food chain. But the Rokurokubi is just one among many, each more unnerving than the last. The Kawanokami, or river gods, are a prime example. The people of Hokkaido believed that the rivers themselves held spirits, powerful forces that controlled the flow of water and life itself. When a fisherman or traveler strayed too close to the riverbank, they could hear the distant, gentle lapping of water, only to realize too late that the river itself was alive. Some say these spirits would reach out and drag the unsuspecting into the depths, their bodies never to be seen again. What was it that drew them in? Was it the call of the river, or was it the sense that these spirits were not so different from the people who lived by them? But not all spirits of Hokkaido were so hostile. There were others that lingered in the dark, hidden places of the forests, the Yamaba, the mountain witch. This creature was said to live high in the mountains, her body long and twisted with age. She would wander the forests, offering advice to lost travelers, but with a sly grin, as though her words carried a hidden weight. To some, she was a protector, a guide through the harsh wilderness. To others, she was a trickster, playing cruel games with those who dared to trust her. The line between friend and foe was often blurred in the shadows of the forest. Was she simply lonely? Or was there a darker reason she kept to herself in those mountain caves? And then there were the kitsune of the north, but these were not the clever, mischievous fox spirits of the south. No, these kitsune were colder, sharper. Their fur was white like the snow that blanketed the mountains, and their eyes gleamed with an intelligence that could pierce straight through you. Some say they could control the very wind, whispering in the ears of those they encountered. At night, in the dead of winter, they would appear by the hearths of unsuspecting villagers, slipping between the cracks in the walls, their form barely visible in the flickering light. And yet, even in their silent grace, they radiated an aura of ancient wisdom, as if they had seen the world change, time and time again, and had always remained unchanged, untouched by the passing of ages. But what made these creatures truly terrifying wasn't just their forms. It was their connection to the land. These spirits were born of the earth itself, of the freezing rivers, the endless forests, the towering peaks. The land gave them life, and in return, they claimed the lives of those who dared to disturb it. There was no escape from their reach, no place to hide from the whispers of the wind, the shadows that moved without a source. To live in Hokkaido was to acknowledge that nature itself was alive, that the mountains and rivers were not just beautiful landscapes, but forces that would protect themselves at all costs. There was an eerie beauty in the isolation of the northern regions of Japan, and the vast emptiness where the snow never seemed to stop falling, and the skies were always a shade of gray. The yokai that inhabited this land were not there for amusement. They were forces of nature, born of a world that was harsh and unforgiving, a reflection of the land's own battle for survival. The creatures of Hokkaido weren't interested in stories or legends, they existed because the land demanded it. They were the spirits of a forgotten world, older than the people who lived there, whose memories were as ancient as the snow that blanketed the forests. To those who lived in Hokkaido, these creatures were not stories told to children at bedtime. They were real. They were part of the very fabric of life, existing in every rustle of the leaves, every gust of wind. The yokai of the north were not merely figments of imagination, they were the living, breathing reminders of the untamed world that lay just beyond the edge of civilization, waiting for anyone who dared to forget their place in it. Even now, in the modern age, the stories of Hokkaido's yokai continue to haunt the dreams of those who live there, passed down through generations. And though the land may have changed, the spirits still watch from the shadows, their presence a reminder that the line between the human world and the world of yokai has always been thinner than we care to admit. In the north, nature reigns, and its spirits are always near, waiting to be remembered. The wind cuts through the jagged cliffs of Tohoku like a sharp blade. The sound of it is constant, always there, whipping through the dense pine forests, echoing across the craggy mountains that loom like silent giants in the distance. There's something unsettling about it, something ancient. It's as if the land itself is speaking, telling its stories in a language only the very old know, its whispers lost to the untrained ear. But if you listen closely enough, you might hear something. You might hear the legends that have haunted these mountains for centuries. In the darkened corners of Tohoku, where the land is untamed and the seasons are harsh, there are tales that will freeze your blood. These aren't the stories of simple spirits or mischievous creatures. These are the stories of beings born from the deep, raw forces of nature. Creatures that have watched over these lands for so long that they are no longer merely folklore, they are the heartbeat of this region, pulsing through its veins. One such creature is the Tengu. In the mountains, they are more than just winged warriors or tricksters, they are the protectors, the silent guardians of the forests. The villagers whisper that when the winds shift and the sky darkens, the Tengu are watching. There are tales of travelers who wandered too deep into the woods, only to find themselves lost, surrounded by a maze of trees that seemed to close in on them. When they thought all hope was lost, a figure would appear on the horizon, a lone Tengu, its sharp eyes gleaming from beneath the dark feathers, guiding the lost soul back to safety. But the Tengu is not just a guardian. It has a temper. Some say that those who venture into its territory without respect, who fail to heed the silent warnings, are never seen again. The Tengu's wrath is swift, and there is no forgiveness for those who disturb the delicate balance of nature. And then, there's Oni. The demons of Tohoku have a different flavor than their counterparts from other parts of Japan. These Oni are not just brutish creatures, they are ancient, born from the darkest depths of the earth. Their red faces are twisted in perpetual rage, their horns jetting from their foreheads like mountains themselves. The villages tell stories of Oni who came down from the peaks, carrying with them the fury of the storms. They were said to be merciless, taking what they wanted, crushing anyone who stood in their way. But there is a deeper truth to the Oni's rage, one that goes beyond mere destruction. The Oni are a warning, a reminder of the power of nature that lies just beyond the fragile barriers of human civilization. In Tohoku, people know that to live in harmony with the land is to walk a fine line. It's not a place where you can afford to forget the old ways, to take more than you need. If you do, the Oni will come, and no one will be spared. But the most chilling of all the creatures in Tohoku are the Yukiana, the Snow Women. Their beauty is otherworldly, their presence both enchanting and terrifying. The Yukiana is said to appear during the coldest of winters, when the snow falls in thick, suffocating blankets, and the world seems to disappear under the weight of the cold. She drifts through the frozen landscape like a phantom, her skin pale as the snow that surrounds her, her eyes cold and distant. Some say that she is a vengeful spirit, seeking out men lost in the snow, luring them into her grasp with the promise of warmth and safety, only to freeze them to death in her icy embrace. Others say that the Yukiana is a spirit of the land itself, born from the cold winds that blow through the mountains. She is both a symbol of nature's beauty and its cruelty, a reminder that even in the harshest moments, there is something mesmerizing, something hypnotic about the frozen world. But there is another side to the Yukiana story, one that speaks to the fragile nature of human existence. There are tales of men who, in the depths of winter, stumbled upon the Yukiana and found themselves drawn to her, not by fear, but by a desperate need for connection. In these rare encounters, the Yukiana would spare them, leaving them alive, but forever changed. Their hearts would grow colder, their souls marked by the winter spirit that had touched them. And so they would return to the world, forever haunted by the snow, by the ice that would never leave their veins. These tales, like the land itself, are harsh and beautiful, terrifying and heartbreaking. The people of Tohoku have learned to live with the yokai that inhabit their world, to respect the old stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. These spirits are not just legends, they are a part of the land, a part of the people who call it home. And while they may not be seen with the eyes, they are always there, lurking in the corners of the mountains, in the forests, and the winds that howl through the night. Perhaps the most unsettling part of these stories is the quiet truth they reveal, that the boundary between the living and the dead, between the human and the supernatural, is thinner than we think. In Tohoku, there is a constant reminder that we are never truly alone. The spirits of the land are always watching, always waiting, and if we are not careful, if we forget the old ways, they will make sure we remember. The streets of Edo were alive with sound. The clatter of wooden sandals on cobblestones, the bustle of traders selling their goods, the hum of voices all mixed into a single, vibrant heartbeat of the city. But somewhere between the lantern-lit alleys and the river's edge, there was something else, a presence, something unseen, slipping through the cracks of everyday life. Not all spirits in Edo were content to remain in the shadows of stories. Some lurked, watching with their eyes like black holes, drawing the living into their web. You might walk through the bustling markets, unaware that a Kawanokami, the river spirit, was watching. With eyes like slow-moving waves, it lived in the water that wound through the city's heart. The river is never just water, it holds memories, and every drop, every ripple, is part of an ancient pulse. Locals say that sometimes, at night, when the world is silent and the moon paints silver trails across the water, you can hear the river whispering to you. But if you listen too long, if you stare into the current too deeply, you might find yourself drifting, pulled by invisible hands into the cold depths of the water. The Kawanokami is a spirit of both life and death, holding the lives of the city's people in its grip, patiently watching, waiting for the moment someone forgets the power of the current. And then there are the Yurei, spirits of the restless dead, forever caught between two worlds. In the dim light of the lanterns, their forms are thin and pale, like smoke clinging to the edges of reality. These spirits don't scream or wail like the legends say. No, they appear as quiet figures, ghosts in the periphery of your vision. They drift, silent and cold, their faces blank, their eyes empty but heavy with sorrow. In Edo, these spirits are not just things of horror. They are reminders of the people who never left, whose grudges and regrets tether them to the city, to its streets, its homes. There's an old saying that if you walk too far at night, past the boundaries of familiar roads, you might feel the coldness in the air, like a hand on your shoulder, light but firm. That's the moment when you know a Yurei is near. But it's not just the ghosts of humans that haunt the land. Edo has its own creatures, born from the interplay between human life and nature's wildness. The Tengu are one such example. Unlike the ferocious warriors of the mountains, these Tengu are tricksters, slipping between the layers of the city like shadows. They wear the guise of men, their long noses and sharp eyes marking them as something otherworldly. They blend in with the crowd, watching from rooftops, from hidden corners, waiting for the chance to make their mischief known. The Tengu are playful spirits, but their games are not harmless. They love to confuse and deceive, leading those who wander too far astray. The city's people know this well. Sometimes, the Tengu's tricks take the form of illusions, pathways that lead nowhere, familiar faces that aren't what they seem. They whisper into the ears of the lonely, drawing them away from the warmth of the crowd, toward a place where only the Tengu know the way. Then, there's the legend of the Kawanokami in another form, Funayurei, the ghost ship. As the boats drift along Edo's canals at night, it's said that some sailors still whisper about the ships that never dock, the ones that drift on, invisible to the untrained eye, lost in a sea of time. But those who see them often don't come back. The Funayurei is a ghostly ship, its sails caught in an eternal wind, forever sailing on a sea that doesn't exist, bringing with it the souls of those who wander too far into the forgotten corners of the world. There's a chilling feeling that follows the sailors who spot it, like being pulled into something you can't escape, a reminder that even the busy streets of Edo have corners too dark to see, too deep to understand. Then comes the Joragumo, the Spider Woman. In the back alleys, where the night air feels thick and heavy, people speak of a woman whose beauty is beyond compare. With her hair cascading like dark silk, she moves with a grace that masks the deadly danger beneath. The Joragumo's silk is not for weaving, it's for trapping. She is a predator who lures the unwary to their doom. At first, the stranger might think they are meeting a lovely woman, perhaps seeking shelter from the rain, but before they know it, they are caught in her web, ensnared by her charm, wrapped in layers of deception. Her true nature reveals itself too late, a monstrous spider, with the legs of death and the heart of a hunter, always looking for the next soul to claim. Edo is a city of contradictions, vibrant and full of life, yet steeped in an undercurrent of the unseen, the unexplained. The people go about their daily routines, unaware that spirits, creatures, and legends walk beside them, hidden in plain sight. They speak of these things in hushed tones, when the night presses close and the lanterns flicker on the edge of their flickering light. They tell their children the stories of the spirits that dwell in the land, some of them protective, some mischievous, others vengeful, and remind them that every corner of the city holds a story waiting to be told. In Edo, every night is a chance to encounter something, someone, that might just be a little different from what you expect. It might not be the things you see that matter, but the ones you don't. The spirits of Edo are alive in every shadow, every gust of wind, every moment when you feel the presence of something close by. You'll never know if the person sitting next to you on the corner of the street is flesh and bone, or something else entirely. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of central Japan, its icy fingers clawing at the rugged landscape. There, high above the world of men, where the earth and sky seem to blend into a haze of mist and cloud, something ancient and untamable stirs. The mountains are not just mountains in Chubu, they are the keepers of secrets, and beneath their snowy blankets lie creatures and spirits that have roamed these lands long before any human ever set foot. These are the yokai of the mountains, and their stories are as old as the hills themselves. There's a tale told in the villages that sit at the foot of the towering peaks, about a creature with eyes that glowed like the embers of a dying fire. The Tengu, a bird-like spirit with the face of a man, is said to haunt the dense forests, hidden in the folds of time. To the unsuspecting traveler, the mountains are a place of refuge, a serene landscape of beauty. But beneath the surface of that peaceful tranquility lies a lurking presence, ever watchful, ever ready to strike. The Tengu, with its sharp beak and eyes that seem to see into the very soul, is both protector and deceiver. They live among the treetops, silent as shadows, and sometimes just as deadly. But the Tengu's tricks are not always malicious. There's a story about a young man, lost in the mountains, whose only hope of survival was the intervention of a Tengu. The creature, intrigued by the man's bravery, led him through the darkened paths, showing him the way out. But as dawn broke and the sun pierced the veil of mist, the Tengu was gone. No thanks, no explanation, just the haunting sound of wind through the trees. Those who know the mountains well say that the Tengu's favor is a rare gift, one that can be just as fleeting as the shadows they cast. Then, there is the tale of Yamaba, the mountain witch, whose laughter echoes through the valleys like a distant storm. Her home is said to be a small hut, hidden in the dense woods, where the trees seem to grow wild and untamed, twisting in unnatural directions. Yamaba is both feared and pitied by those who speak of her, a figure whose beauty is hidden beneath layers of age and decay. She is not just a witch, she is a force of nature, as wild and unpredictable as the mountains themselves. They say that Yamaba can shapeshift, changing into any creature she desires, and that she can control the wind and the rain with a mere gesture. Some claim that if you wander too deep into the mountains, lost and desperate, you may hear her voice calling through the trees, coaxing you deeper into the forest. The legend goes that once, a man, weary and starving, stumbled upon her hut. She offered him food and shelter, but he refused, thinking that the woman's hospitality was too strange, too unsettling. That night, the man vanished without a trace. Some say Yamaba took him, others whisper that he was simply swallowed up by the mountain itself. Either way, the legend is clear, those who disrespect the mountain spirits never leave. Yamaba, like the mountains, is both beautiful and terrifying, her presence as dangerous as the storm clouds that gather on the peaks when the winds begin to howl. But the mountains of Chubu hold other creatures, spirits that walk quietly through the shadows, leaving nothing but the faintest trace of their presence behind. Oni, the fearsome demons of destruction, are often said to live in the deepest, most isolated parts of the mountains. With their massive horns and enormous strength, the Oni are not subtle creatures. They are terrifying, larger than life, and capable of unimaginable destruction. The people of the region speak of the Oni with a mix of awe and terror, for they are not just forces of chaos, they are also embodiments of the power and fury of nature itself. When the snowstorms come and the rivers flood, when the winds tear through the trees and the earth shakes, the Oni are said to be at work, their fury matching the destructive force of the natural world. There's a legend of a small village, nestled in a valley surrounded by the mountains. One year, the snows came early, blanketing the land in a cold, unrelenting grip. The villagers, desperate for food, turned to the mountains for help. The elder, wise and weathered, knew the cost of calling upon the spirits. But hunger, as always, was stronger than fear. So, the elder made an offering to the Oni. The next morning, the villagers awoke to find the snow melted, the rivers flowing freely once more. But the mountains had claimed something in return, the crops, the livestock, the elders who had sent the prayer. Some say the Oni took them willingly, others whispered that they were sacrificed to save the others. Either way, the mountains had spoken, and their price was steep. The mountains of Chubu are a place where the line between the living and the dead blurs, where the air feels thick with the weight of centuries. Every gust of wind that sweeps across the peaks seems to carry a whisper, a reminder that the mountains are not as empty as they appear. They are alive, breathing, watching. The spirits that dwell within them are as much a part of the landscape as the rocks and trees, and their stories are written in the very fabric of the land. For those brave enough, or foolish enough, to venture into the heart of Chubu, the mountains hold both wonder and danger in equal measure. The Tengu might guide you to safety or lead you astray, Yamaba may offer food and shelter, or she may swallow you whole. The Oni will show you the wrath of nature, and the wind will carry the ancient voices of those who have come before. But perhaps the most unsettling part of all is that no matter how well you think you know these mountains, no matter how many times you walk their paths, you will always be a stranger here. The spirits are watching, waiting for the moment when you forget the rules, when you become lost in the mist. And when that moment comes, you may find that the mountains have claimed you, just as they have claimed so many before. It was late in the evening when the lanterns along the streets of Kyoto began to flicker and dance, their soft glow casting long shadows on the ancient cobblestones. The streets were quiet, save for the distant sound of a nightingale's song echoing through the trees. But in the stillness, there was something more, a presence, something just beyond the reach of the light. If you listen closely, you might hear the rustle of paper sliding across the ground or the faint sound of a soft, delicate laugh, like a breath of wind. In the heart of Kansai, legends like these are not simply stories, they are the pulse of the land, beating through every corner of Kyoto, Osaka, and Nara. In Kyoto, where the air is thick with history and temples stand as silent witnesses to centuries of change, the Yukiana walks silently through the snow. Her ghostly figure is said to appear on bitter winter nights, her beauty like a frozen vision, pale and unmoving. The story tells of a traveler, lost in a snowstorm, who encounters her in the deep, isolated mountains outside the city. Her eyes, dark like endless pools of night, beckon him closer, as if to take him into her cold embrace. The traveler, desperate for warmth, follows her through the storm, but with every step, he feels the chill creeping deeper into his bones. It is not warmth she offers, but the cold death of the frozen wilderness. The last thing he hears before the darkness claims him is her soft voice, whispering his name, a sigh lost in the wind. But the Yukiana is not the only spirit haunting the streets of Kyoto. There is also the Rokurokubi, a creature that walks the line between human and monster. By day, she appears as a woman, normal in every way, perhaps a mother, a daughter, or a wife. But by night, she becomes something else. Her neck elongates unnaturally, stretching far beyond the limits of the human body, until her head hovers like a specter over the room. The stories say she feeds on the fear of those who see her, drawn to the shocked, terrified expressions of her victims. It is said that her transformation is not just physical, it is a manifestation of the darkness that resides deep within, a hunger that can never be satisfied. In the busy streets of Osaka, the legends shift from quiet, haunting tales to something darker, more mischievous. Here, in the heart of the city, the Joraguma waits. the Spider-Woman who lures men to their doom with the promise of warmth and affection. Her beauty is undeniable, seductive even. She spins webs that glisten in the twilight, each strand designed to ensnare, to trap. Those who are unfortunate enough to fall under her spell find themselves caught in a world of silk and shadow, where escape is impossible. The Joragumo's webs are not just traps for the body, they are traps for the soul. A single moment of weakness, a single step too far into her world, and the victim is lost, their life consumed by her insatiable hunger. It is said that if you see her weaving her webs in the alleys of Osaka, you must turn away, for once you make eye contact, it is already too late. The air in Nara is thick with the scent of moss and ancient trees, and beneath the towering presence of the sacred deer that roam the grounds, there are spirits that walk between the worlds. The Kawanokami, the river god, is one such spirit. Legend tells of a young woman who went to the river to fetch water for her family, her mind filled with the mundane thoughts of the day. But as she knelt beside the water, she was drawn to the reflection of a handsome man, standing tall and proud on the other side of the stream. He called to her, his voice sweet and inviting, and without thinking, she reached out to him, wanting nothing more than to touch the water. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the river god's grip was upon her, and she was pulled beneath the waves. Her family searched for her, but she was gone, taken by the Kawanokami to dwell in the depths of the river. It is said that if you stand at the water's edge in Nara, you can still hear her voice carried on the breeze, a soft whisper carried by the currents, calling to those who dare to listen. Yet, not all spirits in Kansai are vengeful. In the quiet corners of Kyoto's temples, the soft glow of candlelight flickers against the stone, casting long shadows. Here, the Kawanohanma, the river's spirit, watches over the people. Known for its kindness and gentleness, it is said to help those who are lost or troubled, offering them guidance and comfort when they need it most. The Kawanohanma is a spirit of serenity, a gentle reminder that even in the midst of darkness, there can be light. Unlike the river god that drags people into the depths, this spirit lifts them up, pulling them from the waters to safety. But the line between kind and cruel is thin, and spirits like these do not linger quietly in the background. They wait, watching from the shadows. Every corner of the ancient streets, every crack in the ancient walls, holds the potential for something strange, something unseen. In the flickering glow of a lantern, there is always the chance that the soft whisper of a voice will come from the darkness. Or that you'll see, just out of the corner of your eye, a figure who wasn't there before, lingering, watching, waiting. The spirits of Kyoto, Osaka, and Nara are not simple myths. They are the breath of the land, the pulse of a history that refuses to be forgotten. They are woven into the very fabric of these cities, walking through the streets, crossing the rivers, and lingering in the shadows of the towering temples. These legends are not just stories, they are warnings. Warnings to remember the past, to respect the land, and to never forget that the line between this world and the next is thinner than we dare to acknowledge. In Kansai, every spirit has a story, and every story carries with it a price. The night in the Chugoku region feels different. The wind carries with it a chill, but not the kind that simply cools the skin. It seeps into the bones, like an old memory stirring awake. Along the coast, the sea sways gently, but the waves whisper secrets too ancient to understand. The hills and forests are thick with shadows, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath, waiting. And in the stillness, there's a sense that something watches, something that isn't quite human, but close enough to make you wonder if the world around you is as it seems. In the far reaches of the Chugoku region, a creature named Ubium haunts the quiet paths near the mountains. Her story is both tragic and terrifying, a tale carried by the wind, whispered among the locals. It's said that she was once a mother, a woman full of life and love for her child. But death, cruel and uninvited, claimed her before she could watch her child grow. Her spirit, broken by grief, cannot rest. Now, she roams the quiet hills of Chugoku, seeking to exchange her sorrow for life. She wanders the roads, her ghostly form draped in white, her arms stretched out as though she is still holding her child. If you are walking alone at night, you might hear her faint, desperate cries, calling out for a child that is no longer there. It is said that those who encounter her feel an overwhelming sense of sorrow, a longing that cannot be explained. You might feel the urge to comfort her, to ease her pain, but beware, her eyes are empty, her embrace cold, and her need is endless. Not far from the mountains, in the shadows of Shikoku, there's a tale of a Kawanokami, a river god who is as beautiful as he is deadly. The rivers of Shikoku are known for their clarity, the way they sparkle under the sun, but beneath their calm surface, there are things that stir. This river god lures the lonely and the lost with his voice, his gentle whispers that float over the water like the softest breeze. His beauty is enough to make a traveler pause, to make a heart ache with longing. Those who hear his voice find themselves drawn to the water, their steps slow, hypnotized. They see only the reflection of the river god in the water's surface, but it is too late to turn back. As they kneel down, leaning closer to the river's edge, they feel a cold hand wrap around their ankle, pulling them into the depths. There's no escape, no mercy. The river's depths consume them, their cries lost in the current, their bodies never to be found. On the islands of Shikoku, the spirits seem to carry an ancient, restless energy. aka Manto, a spirit that haunts the bathrooms of old schools and empty public restrooms, is one such entity that stalks these regions. He is a man with a red mask, draped in a crimson cloak, his face twisted in a sinister grin. Those who enter the bathroom may hear the sound of his voice calling from behind the door. His question is simple: red paper or blue paper? If you answer, you are cursed to die in a brutal way, cut by the red paper or suffocated by the blue. Many who hear his voice choose to ignore him, hoping he will leave them alone, but the silence is never enough. The terror hangs in the air long after, like a cloud of dread, as if the spirit is still watching, still waiting for the next victim to walk into his trap. Even in the bustling streets of Hiroshima, a city filled with history and hope, there are whispers of strange happenings at night. Tengu, those trickster birds with human faces, are said to call the deep forests home. But it is the more dangerous ones that haunt the edges of civilization, causing havoc in the night. Tengu are known for their strange powers, able to shapeshift and vanish into thin air. Some say they are mischievous, playing harmless tricks, like hiding tools or switching directions of paths. Others whisper that they are darker, violent, angry spirits that turn their cunning against the weak. The Tengu wait in the trees, silent and still, observing from the shadows. They're always watching, always waiting. And if you are not careful, if you let your guard slip, you might find yourself lost, unable to find your way back to safety. The legends of Chugoku and Shikoku tell of beings who do not follow the rules of the world as we know it. They are not bound by time, by the limits of human understanding. They walk between the worlds, between life and death, between reality and myth. It is said that in the mountains of Chugoku, the Tsukinoko hides, an elusive creature, part snake, part lizard, with a body that coils and slithers through the underbrush. Its eyes glow with an otherworldly light, and its hiss echoes through the trees. The Tsukinoko is rare, even among the yokai, and those who have seen it are few. Yet its legend lingers, whispered by travelers, told by those who have ventured into the mountains and returned with strange tales of what they saw. And then there is the Akiryo, the spirit of a person who is not truly dead, but whose soul has become unmoored, wandering the earth in search of its former body. The Akiryo is dangerous, vengeful, and full of sorrow. It is said that the Akiryo can possess a loved one, causing them to act in ways that are unexplainable, as if their very spirit has been replaced by something darker, more dangerous. In the quiet, sleepy villages of Shikoku, some speak of the Akiryo with fear, as though it is always just out of sight, lurking in the corners of their homes, in the shadows of their hearts. Chugoku and Shikoku are places steeped in mystery, where every mountain, every river, and every whisper of the wind seems to carry the weight of the past. The yokai here are not just spirits, they are the land's memory, its living, breathing soul. The stories they carry are warnings and reminders, teaching us to respect the land, to never forget the fragile balance between the world of the living and the world of the dead. They haunt the very air you breathe, waiting for a moment of weakness, a moment of doubt. And when that moment comes, they'll be there, watching, always watching, ready to remind you that the world isn't always as it seems. The air in Kyushu is heavy with heat, thick with moisture that clings to the skin and wraps itself around your breath. The lush green jungles seem alive, whispering with sounds of creatures unseen. The night is darker here, deeper, with shadows that stretch longer, hiding secrets that go unnoticed by the unknowing eye. In the distance, the hum of cicadas fills the air, a sound that's at once calming and eerie, like the song of a forgotten world. But beneath that hum, there's something else. Something that slips between the trees, something that follows you, unseen, waiting for you to notice. There's a story told in Kyushu, whispered among the people in hushed tones when the rain falls heavy and the moon is hidden behind clouds. They speak of the Ayasoana, a creature that haunts the shorelines, her form both beautiful and tragic. She appears at night, her figure illuminated by the silver glow of the moon, standing just beyond the reach of the waves. Her hair is long, flowing, and dark, her eyes wide and hollow, like the sea itself. Some say she is a woman lost to the sea, drowning in the waves after being abandoned by a lover. Others say she is the spirit of someone who has died, but never truly left. She stands silently, watching the water, waiting. But there is danger in her stillness. If you come too close, if you step onto the wet sand, she will reach out with arms cold as the ocean's depths and pull you into the water. And you'll never surface again. The people know the Ayasoana's sorrow, but they know too well the danger of her touch. And then, in the thick, humid forests of Kyushu, there's another story, one of the Kawanokami, the river god. His is not the gentle beauty of the rivers in Shikoku or the serene nature of the streams in the north. No, the Kawanokami of Kyushu is wild, fierce, and unpredictable. He controls the currents with the strength of his fury, and those who find themselves lost in his waters are never seen again. It is said that the river god waits for the careless traveler, watching from beneath the surface, ready to pull them under with one swift, powerful surge. You'll hear the sound of rushing water before it's too late, the roar of the river rising up like a beast, but by the time you understand what's happening, you'll already be lost, consumed by the river's depths. The islands of Okinawa, with their tropical heat and gentle breezes, hold their own share of yokai, spirits that carry the weight of the island's ancient history. In the villages, near the quiet shores where the waves break against the rocks, people speak of a creature known as Tofukozo, a mischievous spirit that haunts the markets and alleyways. He takes the form of a small child, always carrying a block of tofu under his arm. At first glance, he seems harmless enough, his wide eyes sparkling with innocence. But do not be fooled. Tofukozo is a trickster, a spirit that delights in causing trouble. It is said that he will follow you for days, appearing at unexpected times, always offering you a piece of tofu. But once you take it, once you let your guard down, the tofu will turn to stone in your mouth, and you will feel an unexplainable thirst, as though you've been tricked by something ancient, something cruel. Those who have fallen victim to his tricks speak of a deep, gnawing hunger that lingers long after the encounter. And then there's the haunting presence of funayurii, the ghostly figures that sail the seas of Okinawa, their forms indistinct, veiled in mist. These spirits are said to be the souls of fishermen lost at sea, their boats wrecked by storms that come suddenly, without warning. It is said that they are cursed, trapped in the world between life and death, their spirits unable to rest. When the winds are heavy and the sea churns with waves, you might hear their cries carried on the wind, their voices like distant bells tolling in the fog. Some sailors have seen them, their hollow eyes staring out from the mist, their hands reaching toward the shore. It is said that these spirits seek out the living, searching for those who are close to their fate, those who will soon join them in the depths. If you see them, it is too late. They will pull you into the sea with them, claiming another soul to join their endless wandering. There is also the Akahiko, a spirit of the night who stalks the darkness of Okinawa's streets. He is a creature of shadow and silence, his footsteps barely a whisper on the earth. Akahiko is a spirit of revenge, and his rage is as boundless as the oceans that surround the islands. Some say he was once a man, wronged by a lover, cursed by the gods to wander the earth in search of those who have wronged him. Others believe he was a creature born from the earth itself, a being of the night that preys on those who walk the streets alone after dark. Those who have encountered Akihiko speak of a cold chill that fills the air, the sense that something unseen is watching from the shadows. If you turn the wrong corner, you may find yourself face to face with him. His eyes are said to glow red, burning with an unquenchable rage. And when he moves, it is like a blur, too fast for the human eye, too swift to escape. In Kyushu and Okinawa, the land is alive with spirits, each one bearing the imprint of the place they call home. From the stormy seas to the thick jungles, from the bustling markets to the quiet streets, the yokai here are part of the land itself, shaped by its beauty and its danger. They are the whispers of ancient gods, the restless souls of those who never found peace, the forces of nature that move in ways we cannot understand. They are always watching, always waiting, their presence felt in every shadow, in every rustle of the leaves, in every wave that crashes against the shore. In the warm breeze that sweeps over Okinawa or the misty forests of Kyushu, the yokai of these islands are never far away, always close, always near, their stories intertwined with the very fabric of the land. In the quiet of the night, when shadows stretch and twist in strange ways, you can almost feel the weight of the world pressing in. The creaks of old houses and the hum of the wind through the trees seem like whispers from another world, like voices trying to break through. The fear that tightens your chest is not just about the unknown, but about something much deeper. Something older. A fear that has been passed down through generations, wrapped in stories and legends, tales of spirits and creatures that stalk the edges of our reality. There is a chilling truth in the way yokai live in the spaces between the known and the unknown. These creatures, these spirits, are born from the darkest corners of human fear. They are not just stories told around campfires or warnings whispered by elders. They are the embodiment of the things we cannot understand, the things that make our hearts race and our skin crawl. In every tale, there is a reflection of the anxieties that have shaped a culture, a community, a way of life. They are not just things of myth, they are a mirror to our deepest fears. When the night seems to grow heavier, when the sounds outside your window make your breath catch in your throat, it's easy to imagine the face of a Yukiana, the snow woman. Cold as ice, her beauty lures you into a trance, until her icy touch freezes you where you stand, your body slowly succumbing to the frost. She is more than just a spirit of winter. She is the embodiment of the fear of isolation, of coldness that can creep into your bones until it makes you forget everything but the numbing chill. She is the silent reminder of how, in moments of loneliness, we become vulnerable to forces beyond our control. In the harsh winter of the north, the Yukiana doesn't just freeze the body, she freezes the soul, pulling it into a place where warmth can never reach. The fear she brings is not just physical, it is a fear of being forgotten, of being left alone in a world that turns cold. Then, there are the Kappa. Those mischievous, dangerous creatures that lurk beneath the surface of rivers and ponds, waiting for a moment of weakness. Their actions, dragging children into the water, pulling the innocent under, are a terrifying reminder of the power of nature's hidden dangers. But the true terror of the Kappa is deeper. They are the manifestation of fear itself, of the fear that we cannot protect those we love, that a simple moment of carelessness can steal someone away forever. They remind us of the fragility of life, the way the world can change in an instant. And, like the Kappa's insidious pull, that fear can drown us. It is the constant gnawing thought in the back of your mind that something could happen when you least expect it. The Tengu, with their crow-like features and piercing eyes, are more than just tricksters. They represent the fear of losing control, of power being wrested from you. In the mountains, they are said to take the form of monks, their feathered wings an unsettling contrast to their calm demeanor. The Tengu's power is rooted in arrogance, and the fear of becoming like them, a creature who holds so much power, yet is so consumed by it that they lose all sense of self. They remind us of the dangers of unchecked ambition, of the fears that one day we might become so absorbed in our own importance that we forget how to relate to others. The Tengu feeds off this anxiety, watching from above, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the dark corners of Japan's ancient folklore, there is another yokai, the Oni, large, terrifying demons with sharp claws and horns that pierce the sky. Their very presence strikes terror in the hearts of the people. The Oni are said to be the physical embodiment of evil, of rage that cannot be contained. But the real fear they inspire is not just the terror of being chased or caught, it's the fear of being consumed by anger, of letting the darkness inside take hold. The Oni are a warning, a reminder that if we allow our anger to burn unchecked, it will destroy us. The fear of the Oni is not simply the fear of the creature itself, but the fear of what might happen when we lose ourselves to our own emotions. And then there are the quiet, almost invisible yokai, like the Mokimokurin, the eyes that appear in paper screens. These spirits are not large or overpowering. They are hidden, subtle, yet their presence is enough to send a chill down your spine. They are the fear of being watched, of being scrutinized when you least expect it. They are the unease that settles in your chest when you feel as if someone is always behind you, staring at you from the shadows. The fear of the Mokimokurin is not physical, it is the slow creeping realization that you are never truly alone, that even when you think you are in control, there is always something just out of sight, waiting for you to notice. Yokai stories are not just tales, they are warnings. Each spirit is a way of making sense of a world that is, at times, cruel and unpredictable. They are shaped by the fears that plague the hearts of those who live in that world. The fear of the unknown, the fear of isolation, the fear of being overwhelmed by emotions, the fear of losing control. Each story carries within it the weight of these anxieties, passed down from generation to generation. But what makes these creatures so terrifying is not just their actions, but what they represent. They are reflections of the things we cannot control. They are the anxieties we try to bury, the things that keep us up at night, the doubts that cloud our minds during the day. The Uriai, the restless spirits, are the fear of death and what comes after. The Joragumo, the spider woman, is the fear of being trapped, of being caught in a situation with no way out. The Kitsune, the shape-shifting fox, plays on the fear of deception and trickery, reminding us that not everything is as it seems. Each yokai is a manifestation of a fear that touches us all, a fear that is as ancient as humanity itself. When the night falls and the wind howls through the trees, it's easy to forget that these fears are not just myths. They are part of the human experience. The yokai are not only creatures that haunt our stories, they haunt our minds, our deepest insecurities. They remind us that there is always something lurking, just beyond our vision, ready to pounce when we least expect it. They are the physical manifestation of the terror we carry with us every day, the fear of what we cannot see, cannot understand, and cannot control. It's a chill night, the air heavy with the weight of the unknown. As the wind whispers through the trees, there's a sudden shift, a strange feeling that grips your heart. Shadows stretch unnaturally, and the world around you grows still. In the quiet of that moment, you sense something watching. Something ancient. Something that could be either a blessing or a curse. Yokai are not just creatures, they are reflections of life itself, living between the worlds of light and darkness. They are the embodiment of duality, benevolent and malevolent, kind and cruel, gentle and terrifying. The very essence of these spirits pulls at the heartstrings, as if they walk the fine line between good and evil, a reminder that nothing is ever purely one thing or another. In each yokai, there is a dual nature, a side that can heal and protect, and a side that can harm and destroy. They are not confined to one identity, for their very existence thrives on the balance of opposing forces. Take, for example, the Kitsune, the mystical fox spirit. At first glance, she seems to be a creature of beauty, grace, and wisdom. The fox spirit has long been seen as a protector, bringing good fortune and happiness to those who honor her. In many stories, the Kitsune guides people, offers advice, and protects the vulnerable from harm. Her presence is one of gentle power, a symbol of loyalty and love. But that same Kitsune can, in an instant, become a trickster, a deceiver, playing with the hearts of the innocent, leading them astray. She can warp the truth, shape-shifting into a beautiful woman to seduce, deceive, and betray. The duality within her, the nurturing protector and the sly deceiver, shows us that sometimes the line between friend and foe is not as clear as it seems. Then there's the Joragumo, the spider woman. When you hear her name, you might shiver, for she is both a protector and a predator. In some stories, she is a benevolent being, using her web to protect her home and family. She can even serve as a guardian to those in need. But her other side is far more dangerous. In her malevolent form, she is a seductress, luring in unsuspecting men to their doom, weaving a deadly trap with her silk. Beneath her beautiful appearance lies the horrifying reality of a creature whose only purpose is to feast on the life of others. The Joragumo reminds us that kindness and cruelty often share the same face, that things are not always as they seem. Beneath the surface of gentleness, darkness can lie in wait. The Yukiana, the Snow Woman, is another spirit whose duality is impossible to ignore. In the cold, snow-covered mountains, she may appear as a vision of beauty and serenity. Her graceful figure, white as snow, seems ethereal, almost heavenly. But her beauty hides a chilling truth. When she approaches, the temperature drops, and her touch freezes the very air around her. In some stories, she is merciful, offering a quick and painless death to those caught in her icy grasp. But in others, she is a heartless killer, freezing her victims from the inside out. She embodies the extremes of life, beauty and death, grace and terror, all rolled into one. Then there are the Tengu, those crow-like mountain spirits. At first, they may seem to be nothing more than simple forest dwellers. They can be protectors of sacred lands, guides for travelers, and wise teachers who impart valuable knowledge. But when angered or threatened, the Tengu's wrath is terrifying. They have the ability to control the very wind itself, turning calm skies into storms of fury. They attack without warning, their sharp talons and beaks capable of ripping through flesh. The Tengu's dual nature shows how quickly the balance between peace and chaos can tip. A spirit that guides one moment can become a force of destruction the next. The Tengu is a reminder that power, in its purest form, can either be a gift or a curse. In the night, you might hear the faintest sound, the soft rustling of paper, the movement of something unseen. You might be near a Mokimokurin, the spirit of the eyes that appear in paper screens. At first, they seem harmless enough, just a collection of curious eyes peering through the paper walls. But these eyes are not always benevolent. In some stories, the Mokimokurin is a spirit of mischief, causing fear by watching and following its victims. It is a spirit that embodies the fear of being observed, the discomfort that comes with the sensation of being watched. The eyes seem innocent, but they are the very symbol of anxiety and unease. This duality of being both harmless and menacing is what makes the Mokimokurin so terrifying. Its gaze holds power, it watches, silently, just waiting for the moment when you'll turn to face it. The Oni, those terrifying demons with their horns and claws, are the embodiment of fear and rage. They are often seen as the purest form of malevolence, evil in its most destructive form. But the Oni, too, has a dual nature. In some stories, they serve as protectors, warding off evil spirits or guarding the boundaries between the living and the dead. They can be forces of strength in times of need. But their wrath, when provoked, is devastating. The Oni's ability to shift from protector to destroyer reflects the dual nature of power itself, how it can be used to defend or to destroy. The fear they inspire is the fear of losing control, the fear that our own anger might consume us, just as it consumes them. Every yokai carries with it a piece of this duality. Benevolent and malevolent, dark and light, kind and cruel. Each one walks the line between what we fear and what we long for. The stories that have been passed down for generations show us that nothing is ever purely one thing. In every shadow, there is a hint of light. In every kindness, there is a flicker of danger. And in every yokai, there is a reminder that the world is not made of simple lines. There are no purely good or purely evil beings. There is only balance, and sometimes, balance requires both sides. The duality of yokai reflects the duality within ourselves, the good and bad, the light and dark that we carry with us every day. These spirits, these creatures, remind us that life is never just one thing. It is always a mixture of both. In the dead of night, when the world is cloaked in a heavy silence, a figure appears. Pale as the snow, she drifts through the cold, her breath like ice in the air. Eyes as dark as the endless night lock with yours, pulling you into a trance you can't escape. This is the Yukiana, the snow woman, whose beauty is as deadly as the winter frost. Her presence is like a soft whisper in the wind, gentle at first, but with the chill of death lingering just beneath. Yokai myths have a way of making us see women in ways that both mesmerize and terrify. Their forms shift, their roles change, and yet, they always carry the same weight, symbols of both power and danger. The Yukiana stands as one of the clearest examples of how gender is portrayed in these eerie legends. She is a woman of beauty, cold and untouched, a spirit of winter itself. Her beauty lures, her chill kills. She doesn't care for warmth, and the touch of her frozen hands leaves a man lost to the cold forever. The duality of her nature, graceful yet lethal, speaks to the way women have been both revered and feared throughout history. In another story, there is the Rokuro-kubi, a creature who transforms from an ordinary woman to something horrific. By day, she is a beautiful, kind woman, living among her people. By night, her true nature comes out. Her neck stretches, impossibly long, her face contorts, and she becomes something monstrous. This transformation reflects a kind of fear many have of the unknown, of what lies beneath the surface of the everyday. The Rokuro-kubi is a reminder that what we see is not always what is. She holds a mirror to the way women were often seen as deceptive, dangerous, or unpredictable. A beautiful face can hide the unimaginable, just as a kind demeanor can mask the darkness within. These legends, while terrifying, also offer a kind of understanding, an exploration of what it means to be a woman in a world that is constantly trying to box you in, to control your narrative. The Yukiana's quiet power is undeniable, even as it strikes fear in the hearts of those who encounter her. She represents the cold distance often placed between women and the world around them, a distance that can turn deadly when not understood or respected. She is beautiful, untouchable, and dangerous, and her coldness is not just an accident of nature but a reaction to the world that has made her so. The Rokuro-kubi, with her twisted neck and monstrous transformation, embodies a different kind of fear, one that is more internal. She is the fear of something we cannot understand or control, the fear of what a woman might become when she is pushed beyond her limits, when she is forced to live with a reality that seeks to diminish her power. She is both the victim and the villain, the beautiful woman who turns monstrous when her true nature is revealed. Her transformation can be seen as a metaphor for the way women have been forced to wear masks to survive in a world that demands they be one thing while punishing them for not being another. But not all the women of yokai myths are purely terrifying. Some are nurturing, protective figures, spirits that show a softer, more compassionate side. The Yurei, the vengeful ghost of a woman wronged, is an example of this. Often dressed in a white funeral kimono, with long, disheveled hair and hollow eyes, the Yurei is not inherently evil. Her rage is the result of betrayal, of love lost or never returned. She is the ghost of a woman whose life was cut short by injustice. Though she haunts, she does so not out of malice, but out of a need for recognition and justice. Her grief fuels her actions, and though her vengeance is terrifying, it is born from love, not hatred. In this way, she reminds us of the quiet strength that women possess, the strength to stand up for themselves, even after death. There are also the stories of the Oiwa, the wife whose face is disfigured by betrayal, seeking revenge in a way that chills the soul. Her story, full of pain and fury, paints the picture of a woman who is pushed to the edge of humanity. Her transformation from loving wife to vengeful spirit is a reminder of how the pain of injustice can twist a person, turning them into something they were never meant to be. Oiwa's beauty is taken from her, her face disfigured by poison, and in return, she becomes the very embodiment of anger and vengeance. The men who wronged her could not contain her wrath, and though she is terrifying, she is also a reflection of the deep, untold stories of women whose voices have been silenced or ignored. In these myths, women are not just passive figures, they are the force of nature itself, the storm that can tear down a mountain or the quiet whisper of the wind that bends the branches. They are both creators and destroyers, nurturing and terrifying, and in their stories, we see the full spectrum of human experience. At the heart of these legends is the understanding that women, in all their complexity, are impossible to fully tame or define. They cannot simply be good or bad, kind or cruel, for there is a space between these extremes, a space where they are both. The Yukiana and the Rokurokubi show us how women are simultaneously objects of desire and fear. They are beings who can give life and take it away, whose beauty is both an asset and a weapon. These legends don't just reflect the societal fears surrounding women, they magnify them, turning them into something larger than life, something we can't easily grasp but can't look away from. Through these myths, we feel the tension between the desire to control and the inevitability of the wild. We see women in their most powerful and vulnerable forms, spirits of beauty and rage, protectors and destroyers. It's a duality that runs deep, a reminder that every woman is a story waiting to be told, with layers of complexity, contradiction, and strength that can never be reduced to a single narrative. You walk down a narrow path, the mist swirling around your ankles. The trees are silent, their branches heavy with the weight of years. There's a whisper, just on the edge of your hearing, a rustle in the underbrush. It's faint, but it's there. Your heart quickens as the air seems to shift. And then, you see it, an unexplainable shape, just beyond the edge of the forest, moving in a way that doesn't make sense. Is it an animal? A trick of the light? Or something far older, something that's been here long before the land was settled? Your breath catches in your throat. Could it be a yokai? Identifying a yokai is no simple task. These beings are elusive, shifting, and often hide in plain sight, blending seamlessly into the shadows of our world. They are creatures born of fear and mystery, with traits and behaviors that defy the normal rules of nature. But with a careful eye, a keen sense, and a little courage, their true nature can sometimes be revealed. Start by looking at the eyes. In the world of yokai, eyes often tell you more than anything else. They can be too wide, too bright, or too dark. Some yokai have eyes that glow in the night, like lanterns in the distance, while others might be completely absent, as if the face before you has never been fully formed. Take the Joragumo, the Spider Woman. She can appear as a beautiful woman, her face stunning in its grace. But if you look closer, her eyes, filled with a strange depth, might give her away. They seem too calm for someone who is not human, and they draw you in with an unnatural pull. If you gaze at them for too long, it may already be too late. Next, pay attention to their movement. A yokai's movement can be disjointed or unnervingly smooth. The Rokurokubi is a good example. By day, she may seem like an ordinary woman, but at night, her neck stretches unnaturally, creeping through the darkness like a snake. Watch for something that doesn't move like it should. Humans have a certain rhythm when they walk, a way their bodies shift with gravity. Yokai don't follow this rhythm. They float, they slither, or they crawl in impossible ways. The sound they make, or the lack of it, can also be a key. Some yokai are known for the eerie quiet that surrounds them, their footsteps muffled by some unnatural force. Others might emit sounds that seem out of place, like the soft scraping of claws against wood or a low hum of a song with no singer. The Kawanokami, river deities that can be both benevolent and vengeful, are often heard before they are seen. If you listen closely to the sound of running water, sometimes you'll hear their laughter, a sound that rises from the depths, soft yet chilling. But there are other, more subtle traits to watch for. The Tengu, for instance, are bird-like creatures, often with a red face and a long nose, resembling monks, but with an air of danger. They are masterful at disguising themselves as humans, but the way they carry themselves, standing a bit too straight, a bit too stiff, can sometimes give them away. Tengu are guardians, yes, but they are also tricksters. If you find one alone, they might test your wits, or lead you astray if you aren't careful. Another trait of yokai is their environment. Many of these creatures are tied to specific places, forests, mountains, rivers. They have their own territories, and they don't like to leave them. If you venture into a forest and feel an oppressive weight in the air, or if the trees seem to grow closer as you walk, it could be that a yokai is watching. Kawanokami spirits often haunt the banks of rivers, where they watch travelers who wander too close. They are shapeshifters, sometimes appearing as old women or as animals, but the stillness of the water often marks their presence. If the water grows unnaturally still, it could be the calm before the storm, as these spirits are known for their tempers. Some yokai are known for their distinctive smell. The urei, for example, a restless spirit, is said to carry the scent of rotting flowers or damp earth. You might smell it on the breeze before you see her, like a warning that something is not right. Kawanokami spirits, on the other hand, might bring a fresh, clean scent, like the smell of fresh rain, but it will linger far too long, suffocating you in its sweetness. They are spirits of water, and the air around them always feels damp, like the moment before a storm. Another feature to be wary of is their unpredictability. Many yokai are shapeshifters, able to assume the form of a human or an animal, which makes them incredibly difficult to identify. One of the most famous shapeshifters is the kitsune, a fox spirit. They are often revered for their cunning and intelligence, but also feared for their ability to deceive. A kitsune might take the shape of a beautiful woman, the perfect lover or wife, but if you pay close attention, you might notice a slight gleam in her eyes, a flicker of something inhuman, a brief flash of sharp teeth or fur. These creatures are both playful and vengeful, and their trickery can be dangerous. And then there are the sounds they leave behind. Some yokai don't make noise when they move, but their presence lingers in the air, like an echo of their passing. Tsuchigumo, the earth spider, is said to be felt more than seen. If you stand still in the right place, you might feel the ground tremble, the earth shifting beneath your feet as though it's alive. The air might grow still, thick with a sense of foreboding. Their appearance can also give you a clue. Kappa, the river imp, is often described as a small creature with the body of a turtle and the face of a monkey, with a dish-like depression on top of its head filled with water. But beware, if you encounter one, they are not harmless. They might challenge you to a game of sumo or try to pull you into the water. Their green, slimy skin is their most distinguishing feature, like a creature pulled from the depths of a nightmare. The world of yokai is full of these eerie, uncanny creatures that blur the lines between what we know to be real and what we cannot explain. Their traits are often a warning, a way to make us see the world differently, to notice the things we usually overlook. They appear in places we dare not look too long, in the spaces between day and night, and the mist that rises from the earth when the sun sets. The more you know about them, the more you realize you may never truly be alone again. To identify a yokai is not just about seeing, it's about sensing. It's about noticing the details, feeling the change in the air, and recognizing the signs of something that exists just beyond the reach of your understanding. These creatures, these spirits, are everywhere, waiting to be noticed, waiting to show you the world as it really is. If you listen closely enough, you just might hear them whispering your name. The moonlight slants through the trees, casting long shadows that seem to move of their own accord. The air is thick with a strange tension, as though the very night is holding its breath. You step forward, the path narrowing ahead of you, and the forest feels strangely alive, like something is watching from the darkness. A sudden cold breeze ruffles the leaves, sending a shiver down your spine. You pause. You feel it now, that unmistakable presence, the pull of something ancient and otherworldly. Something you can't see, but that you can sense. It's there, lurking just beyond the edge of your vision. A yokai. Every step you take seems to draw you closer to it, and instinctively, you reach for something small, something that could protect you, that could keep you safe. In the world of yokai, protection is not just a matter of strength or bravery, it's a matter of the unseen, of the power that lies in words, objects, and rituals that shield you from forces too dark and too powerful to face alone. First, there is the simple and ancient power of the amulet. In times of old, travelers would carry these small, sacred objects, sometimes tied around their necks or placed in their homes. Made from paper, wood, or metal, these amulets are more than just trinkets, they are the embodiment of spiritual power, charged with the intent to ward off evil. The most common amulet is the ofuda, a small piece of paper inscribed with prayers and symbols, often placed on doors or gates. These amulets are said to form a barrier between the physical and spiritual worlds, making it difficult for any malevolent spirit to cross. But not all amulets are so simple. Some are blessed by priests or monks, charged with protection and healing. The Yakuza, a feared yokai of misfortune and destruction, is often warded off by these blessings. If you encounter such a spirit, the mere presence of a blessed amulet can stop it in its tracks. When the danger is close, you may press the amulet to your chest and whisper the prayers that have been passed down through generations. The words themselves are believed to be a force, weaving a protective shield around you that no spirit can penetrate. You feel its warmth, a soft hum that brings comfort, as though the universe itself is watching over you. But sometimes, amulets alone are not enough. Sometimes, the spirits that stalk the world are too strong, too determined to be kept away. That's when you need the power of rituals, the old, sacred practices that connect you to the divine, to the earth, and to the spirits of your ancestors. One such ritual is the purification rite. In many traditions, purification is the first step in protecting oneself from spirits. It may seem simple, a bowl of water, a handful of salt, or a bundle of herbs. But the intention behind it is where the true power lies. To purify is to cleanse yourself from negative energies, to remove the trace of the yokai's presence before it can take root. The rite may begin with the sprinkling of salt, known to drive away evil spirits, around the perimeter of your home. You may also burn incense, letting its smoke rise into the air like a prayer, carrying your wishes of protection to the gods. The smell is soothing, grounding, and as the smoke swirls in the air, you can feel the weight of your fears lifting. The spirits grow restless, but they cannot stay. The sacred scent pushes them back, beyond the borders of your space. Another method is the use of the shamanawa, a sacred rope decorated with rice straw and placed across entryways to your home. This powerful symbol of protection is used to mark the boundaries between the physical world and the spirit world. When a yokai crosses the shamanawa, it is said to lose its strength, its power slowly slipping away like sand through fingers. The rope is a barrier, but it is also a reminder, here, in this place, you are safe. You are protected. But what if the spirit isn't lurking outside your home? What if it's already inside? The answer lies in the chanting of incantations, words passed down through generations, each syllable a weapon against the unseen. In some cases, a single word can be enough. Kawai or akabi spoken with intent reverberates through the air like a shield. The words themselves are ancient, resonating with a power that stretches back to the very heart of Japan's spiritual traditions. When spoken aloud, they vibrate with energy, sending a ripple through the air that disrupts the presence of any dark spirit nearby. These incantations can be used to banish spirits or simply to send them into retreat. In some traditions, more elaborate rituals are used to ward off yokai, involving the use of sacred items and the invocation of divine beings. Tengu are known to be especially hard to ward off, but a carefully prepared ritual can be enough. You may need a shikujo, a ritual staff used by monks to focus the energy of the universe. Holding the staff, you would call upon the gods, invoking their names and powers. The air around you will thrum with energy, and the yokai, sensing this divine strength, will recoil, unable to withstand the power that you have summoned. There's also the fuda, a paper charm that may be tacked to your door, windows, or walls. The charm contains sacred words of protection that bind evil forces outside your home. To the yokai, it is a barrier they cannot cross, an invisible wall of light that will burn them if they try. The very act of placing the fuda in your home is a statement, you are not welcome here. For those who wish to protect themselves on a personal level, there's the protective mirror. It is said that yokai are terrified of their own reflection, that the sight of themselves is enough to banish them from the living world. A simple mirror placed in the right spot can serve as a powerful deterrent. It is a shield, an ever-watchful sentinel that keeps the spirits at bay. Every glance in the mirror reminds the yokai that they are seen, and in the act of being seen, they lose their power. There are stories, too, of warriors and travelers who carry their own spiritual weapons, swords blessed by monks, talismans of great power, or even personal rituals that they carry with them wherever they go. These weapons are not simply physical, they are imbued with spiritual strength, forged in the fires of belief and intention. The very presence of these items is enough to make the yokai hesitate, to make them question their approach. But even when all else fails, there is always one final defense: the strength of your own will. In the world of yokai, fear is a spirit's greatest weapon. The more you fear, the more powerful they become. But if you can stand your ground, if you can let go of that fear, the yokai lose their grip. They are creatures of darkness, and darkness cannot thrive in the light. When you stand tall, when you speak with the conviction that you are not afraid, you become a force they cannot contend with. You are protected not just by amulets and rituals, but by your own spirit, strong, unyielding, and resolute. In the end, it is not just about what you carry with you, but what you carry within you. And when you face the unknown, when the shadows press in from all sides, it is your own strength that will shine the brightest. The yokai may come, but they cannot stay. Not as long as you stand strong. Not as long as you are prepared. The moonlight spilled across the ground, casting a silver sheen over the dense forest. The wind whispered between the trees, but it wasn't the wind that sent chills down his spine. It was the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Kayamaro adjusted his sword, its cold steel a reassuring weight in his hand. He had faced countless yokai before, but tonight, he could feel something darker, something more powerful than he had ever encountered. Legend had it that yokai hunted the weak, but only the strong could hunt them. And Kayamaro, a man whose name was whispered in fear and reverence, was among the most famous yokai hunters to ever walk the earth. His footsteps were sure as he made his way deeper into the forest, but his mind was sharp, every sense attuned to the slightest movement. He tracked down many spirits, each one more terrifying than the last. But the yokai that waited for him tonight was no mere trickster or mischievous spirit. It was a creature born of pure malevolence, a being that could turn daylight to darkness with a single glance. As he ventured further into the shadows, memories of the legendary hunters who had walked this path before him began to fill his thoughts. The stories were as old as time itself. There were warriors who faced yokai with steel and wit, monks who confronted the supernatural with only their faith, and sages whose knowledge of the spirit world was so deep that they could banish the darkest entities with a single chant. The echoes of these ancient figures resonated through time, their deeds carved into the annals of history, their names remembered by every person who dared to step into the night with a weapon in hand and a heart full of courage. But none were as celebrated as Mochizuki Koyo, a samurai whose name had become synonymous with yokai hunting. Koyo's legend began with a simple task: to rid a village of an evil spirit that had plagued it for years. But what began as a small mission soon turned into an epic battle against a monstrous yokai, a creature that could take the form of any man, any woman, any child. It slithered through shadows, manipulating the villagers and turning their own fears against them. Koyo, however, was no ordinary warrior. He had learned the art of confronting spirits, not with brute strength, but with cunning and knowledge. He knew that the yokai would not fight him head-on. Instead, it would deceive him, manipulate him into doubting his own senses. But Koyo wasn't easily deceived. In the dead of night, armed with only his sword and a handful of sacred charms, he set out into the mist, his heart steady despite the overwhelming sense of dread in the air. The creature appeared to him as a beautiful woman at first, its eyes full of sorrow and pleading. But Koyo had been trained to see beyond the surface, and he knew better than to trust the false appearance. With a swift slash of his blade, he revealed the monstrous serpent that lay hidden beneath her skin. The battle was fierce, but in the end, Koyo's strength and insight won the day. His name would be remembered forever, his tale a warning to all who dared to challenge the yokai. The story of Mochizuki Koyo was not an isolated one. Many other hunters had faced down the spirits that lurked in the shadows, each with their own methods, each with their own reasons for taking up the fight. Some, like the monk Sajobo, used the power of prayer and sacred rituals to call upon the divine. Sajobo, renowned for his wisdom, had once been tasked with eliminating a particularly vengeful yokai that had taken up residence in a temple. This creature was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a manifestation of pure rage that would tear apart everything in its path. The monk, though, did not meet this force with violence or anger. He knew that the only way to defeat it was through compassion. Sajobo stood in the temple's courtyard, his hands clasped in prayer as he called upon the gods to purify the spirit. The yokai appeared before him in a terrifying form, half man, half beast, with eyes that burned with a hatred so intense it could melt stone. But Sajobo did not flinch. Instead, he spoke to the creature, his voice calm and steady. "Why do you rage, spirit?" he asked. "What is it that causes you such pain?" The yokai's twisted form began to shift, its anger momentarily subsiding as it was drawn to the monk's words. It spoke of old wounds, of betrayal and loss, of a pain that had festered for centuries. Sajobo listened, understanding that this yokai's vengeance was born not of malice, but of sorrow. With compassion, he performed a ritual to heal the spirit, to guide it into peace. And in that moment, the yokai was freed from its anger, its form returning to that of a gentle, humble creature. Then there was Yagyu Muninori, the famed swordsman and strategist who faced not only yokai but the dangers of human treachery. Muninori's encounter with a particularly dangerous yokai is still spoken of with awe today. This creature had taken the form of a warrior, luring unsuspecting travelers into a deadly duel. Muninori, with his razor-sharp senses, knew immediately that something was wrong. He refused to draw his sword, choosing instead to use his mind, understanding that the spirit fed on fear and confusion. As the yokai charged, Muninori stepped aside, allowing the spirit to pass harmlessly by. The yokai, enraged by Muninori's composure, lashed out in fury, but the swordsman stood his ground, waiting for the right moment. Finally, with a single movement, he tricked the yokai into striking a mirror. The creature's own reflection sent it into a fit of madness, allowing Muninori to capture its spirit and banish it for good. Each of these hunters had a unique story, but all of them shared one common trait: they faced the yokai not with fear, but with strength, wisdom, and courage. They knew that the yokai were not mere monsters to be slain, but manifestations of the world's deepest fears and sorrows. And it was in understanding this, and seeing the yokai not as enemies but as troubled spirits, that they were able to confront them successfully. As Kayamaro stood alone in the forest, the wind howling around him, he couldn't help but feel the weight of those legends pressing in on him. The stories of Koyo, Sajobo, and Muninori filled his mind, their courage and wisdom a guide. The yokai before him would test him in ways he could not yet fathom. But he knew, as they had known before him, that it was not just the sword or the ritual that would win this fight, it was his heart. With one last steadying breath, he stepped forward, knowing that the battle to come would add his name to the growing list of those who had fought, and survived, against the yokai. It was a cold night when Yuki stood at the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she gazed into the distance. The snow fell quietly around her, wrapping the world in a blanket of silence. Her eyes, pale and distant, seemed to follow the falling flakes, tracing their patterns in the dark. The silence was deafening, almost too much to bear. She felt it again, the cold, bitter presence of the spirit that haunted her. It wasn't something she saw, not in the conventional sense, but it was something she felt, deep within her bones. The Yukiana, the snow woman, was real. And as real as she had ever been, her haunting figure was a part of the world now, as much as it had been centuries ago. Yokai are not easily forgotten. They linger in the shadows of our lives, no matter how much we try to push them away. They are both part of history and part of the living world, breathing life into ancient fears, weaving them into the fabric of our modern existence. The feeling of being watched, the rush of cold air against your neck, the rustle of unseen footsteps behind you in the dark, these are the things yokai bring to life. They are ancient stories dressed in the mask of fear, and yet, they still captivate us. There's something about yokai that calls to something primal within us. It's a lure that tugs at our deepest fears and desires. They don't just haunt old temples or abandoned houses, they weave themselves into our lives, becoming mirrors to the fears we carry. They represent the unknown, the things we cannot see, understand, or control. And perhaps it's that unknown that keeps them so relevant. The Yukiana's coldness isn't just the chill of snow, it is the isolation, the heartache, the relentless passage of time. Her presence reflects the harshest truths about loneliness and loss, and even though we may not walk through the snow-laden mountains, the feeling of being lost, abandoned, or frozen in place lingers within us all. This sense of connection between the yokai and the human experience is something timeless, an unspoken thread that ties generations together. In the heart of cities, where the streets are lit with neon lights and the noise of life never fades, people still whisper of encounters with spirits. Perhaps the face of the yokai has changed, but the heart, the terror, the fascination remains the same. What is it about a yokai that makes it so enduring? It's the complexity. The way they embody both the seen and unseen parts of our world. How they blur the lines between reality and myth. How they offer something we can't easily pin down but feel deeply. Think of the Rokorokubi, those women whose necks stretch impossibly long under the cover of darkness. They seem playful at first, teasing, harmless even. But that twisted grin they wear, it's a reminder of the monstrous parts of us we don't want to face. The Rokorokubi doesn't just stretch her neck, she stretches the very limits of our understanding of the human form. There's a beauty in that grotesqueness, a strange comfort in seeing the familiar twisted into something unrecognizable. We are all familiar with the feeling of becoming something we are not, of pushing our own limits. The Rokorokubi is us, reflecting the way we fight against the constrictions of society, the way we bend and stretch until we break. There is beauty in the grotesque, a kind of raw vulnerability, and that's what yokai bring to the table. They hold a mirror to the parts of ourselves we don't like to acknowledge. But we can't look away. They remind us of our humanity. People fear what they don't understand, and yet, in many ways, it is that very fear that makes yokai so alluring. They are shadows in the dark, but they are also teachers. The stories of yokai don't just exist to frighten. They warn us, show us how to live, what to avoid, and what to accept. The Kappa, a mischievous water demon, is a reminder of nature's power and the dangers of being careless near water. The Tengu, with its sharp beak and deadly skill, is a reflection of the balance between wisdom and pride. And the Kitsune, the fox spirit, teaches the value of cunning, patience, and sometimes, deception. But these creatures are not simply evil, they are nuanced. Some yokai come to harm, but others bring protection, or even love. In this way, they are like us. There's a duality to our existence, and yokai capture it perfectly. We all have our darker side, our anger, our regrets, our fears. But within that darkness, there can also be redemption, strength, and growth. This complexity is perhaps what keeps yokai so relevant today. In a world that often seems black and white, yokai remind us that nothing is ever so simple. They show us that the things that terrify us most can also be the things that shape us into who we are meant to be. They are both the storm and the calm after it, the lightning and the thunder, the dark and the light. Yokai thrive on the edges of human experience, at the crossroads of reason and superstition, fear and fascination. And maybe that's why, even in a world driven by science and technology, they haven't lost their power. They exist in the spaces between what we know and what we don't, thriving in our need for mystery, for the unexplained. They push against the boundaries of our understanding, and in doing so, they remind us that there are things in this world we will never truly know. We carry yokai with us in the quiet moments, when the lights flicker and the shadows move in strange ways. They are part of the air we breathe, lingering just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to remind us of their presence. And in that moment, when we feel a chill run down our spine or hear the rustle of unseen feet behind us, we know they are with us. The yokai have never left, and they never will. They are here to stay. And in a world that changes faster than we can keep up, perhaps that is the greatest comfort of all, to know that something so old, so rooted in the essence of human existence, can still capture our imagination. The fire crackled in the quiet room, its orange light dancing across the walls, casting long, twisting shadows. The wind howled outside, making the wooden house creak and groan as if it too feared the dark. And in the corner of the room, an ancient figure loomed, a figure whose very presence seemed to make the room grow colder. The creature was not from these lands, but its eerie shape and glowing eyes felt strangely familiar. For a moment, it was as though the walls between worlds had thinned, and what had once been Japanese folklore now echoed in distant corners of the world. Around the globe, stories of creatures lurking in the dark, of beasts, spirits, and demons that creep into the minds of those who dare to listen, mirror the tales of Japan's yokai. From Europe's terrifying banshees to the ghostly figures in South American traditions, from the African legends of shape-shifting tricksters to the North American skinwalkers who haunt the night, there is a thread that runs through humanity's storytelling. The monsters change shape, the names vary, but the fear, the primal, visceral fear, remains the same. What does it say about us, that in every corner of the world, we have these creatures that haunt our nights, that lurk just beyond our understanding? In many ways, yokai are not confined to Japan. Their influence has stretched far beyond the islands where they were born, their spirits seeping into the folklore of other cultures like ink bleeding onto the pages of a book. The kappa, that mischievous water spirit from Japan, has echoes in European water creatures like the kelpie, a shape-shifting horse that lures people to watery graves. The kelpie, much like the kappa, is a reflection of our ancient fear of water, a fear of the unknown depths that conceal both life and death. Both creatures share the common threads of danger and deception, yet the core message remains the same: there is a price to pay for being careless near the water's edge. Then there is the kitsune, the fox spirit with its wily, cunning nature. The kitsune, which can take human form, is an example of a yokai that straddles the line between good and evil. In Japan, it is often seen as a protector, a spirit that brings love or fortune but can also turn deadly if wronged. The kitsune has a cousin in Western folklore, the shape-shifting foxes of Celtic and Norse mythology, beings that slip between worlds, bridging the gap between the mortal and the spirit realms. And in other parts of the world, there are similar trickster figures, creatures that can deceive, that can transform, that can seduce us with their beauty or trick us into making dangerous choices. They are reminders that the world is not always as it seems. And the tengu, with its fierce beak and masterful skills in combat, has its counterparts in the tall tales of European knights battling monstrous creatures in forests. In both stories, the line between man and beast is blurred. In some versions of the tengu myth, the creature is a guardian of the mountains, keeping intruders at bay. In others, it's a menacing figure that tests the very strength of those who dare challenge it. The tengu's embodiment of the mountains, as both protector and threat, mirrors the powerful and unpredictable forces of nature, a reminder that we are all at the mercy of the world around us, and that there is always something more powerful than us waiting in the shadows. But it's not just these Japanese spirits that have traveled far. The very concept of spirits, of beings that slip between the world of the living and the dead, is universal. In African cultures, the stories of shapeshifters and spirit protectors echo the duality of yokai like the tengu or the rokorokubi. In the Caribbean, the idea of a vengeful spirit haunting the living is seen in the figure of the jumbi, a ghostly presence that punishes the wicked, much like how yokai sometimes embody the darker side of human nature, punishing those who overstep their bounds. Every culture seems to carry a warning in its stories, a reminder of the danger of venturing too far from the known into the realm of the supernatural. The yokai's reach doesn't just stop at the ancient myths and folklore, it has crept into modern culture as well. It has shaped the way we think about the supernatural in ways we may not even realize. Take the tales of urban legends that span cultures, whether it's the tales of spirits haunting the subways of New York or the eerie stories of ghostly figures in Eastern Europe. These modern-day stories are born from the same fears that yokai represent, a fear of what's unknown, a fear of what lurks in the darkness. And it's not just in the stories we tell, but in the films, the video games, and the art that we create. The visual and emotional influence of yokai is undeniable. From the creatures that haunt the screens of anime to the monsters in Western horror films, they share the same haunting essence. The yokai has a way of slipping into our hearts, silently becoming a part of our shared human experience. They don't just haunt Japan, they haunt us all. And perhaps this is why yokai remain so relevant today, in cultures all around the world. They represent the shadow side of humanity, the fear, the curiosity, the questions we don't have answers to, and the things we can't explain. No matter where we come from, these stories resonate because they speak to something universal inside us all. Even in the digital age, where technology has made the world feel smaller, the world of yokai has only expanded. They are not relics of the past, they are alive in the art we create, the stories we tell, and the nightmares we dream. The spirit of the yokai, with all its malice, mischief, and mystery, is something that transcends borders, that connects us to something deeper, something darker, something undeniably human. As the wind outside continues to howl, the figure in the corner of the room watches, waiting. The flickering flame casts long shadows against the walls, and for a moment, it's hard to tell what is real and what isn't. And maybe that's the point. Yokai are not just stories. They are pieces of the world that we have yet to fully understand, wrapped in fear and fascination, slipping quietly into the corners of our lives, no matter where we are. They belong to the world, and to us, forever. The screen flickers, and for a moment, the room feels colder. A shadow crosses the edge of the screen, a form that doesn't quite fit in the sharpness of digital clarity. The creature appears, its features impossible to place, too strange to belong to the world of humans, yet so real in its uncanny way. The hum of the computer fills the room as the creature moves, silently, its eyes glowing, its shape shifting. It's a yokai, though you might not know its name. In the digital age, it no longer lives just in the dark corners of old Japanese folklore. It's here, in this space, part of a new world. The yokai's legacy is evolving. But with every click, every shared post, every screen that lights up with these images, the question lingers, is it a ghost of the past, or something new, something that lives now, born from our own fears? In the past, the yokai were creatures of the night. Stories whispered in the dim light of lanterns, told by elders to warn the curious or teach the young. They were part of the fabric of the world, woven into the very air we breathe and the soil we walk on. They were beings that lurked at the edges of our understanding, challenging us, scaring us, and sometimes, guiding us. But now, in this world of constant connection, where our lives are intertwined with technology, the yokai are more than just stories. They have become part of a different landscape. The creatures that once haunted quiet mountain passes, dark forests, and forgotten temples now exist in pixels, in code, and in the minds of millions who live in a world where screens are their windows. This isn't just about old stories surviving in a new medium, it's about how these spirits, these creatures, are being reimagined and transformed. They are no longer confined to the pages of ancient scrolls or the whisper of the wind in the trees. They are alive, now more than ever, in the digital spaces we inhabit. When you open your phone and scroll through your feed, you might see a yokai that makes your skin crawl, a kitsune in a video game, a creepy drawing shared by thousands, a digital animation that brings to life the mischievousness of a kappa, or the chilling eyes of a yukiana. These digital manifestations are not mere copies, they are reinterpreted, reimagined, and in some ways, reborn. In this digital age, yokai are not just haunting folklore, they are expressions of our collective anxieties. They reflect the fears of a generation that has grown up on a steady diet of technology, that spends hours every day in an artificial world that feels too real. These creatures are born from the very same darkness that once filled ancient forests and mountain paths. But now, that darkness is no longer far off, it's in our homes, our pockets, and our minds. The yokai have adapted, like shadows stretching to fit new forms, using new tools to make us feel the same old fears, albeit in a way we've never known before. The fear of the unknown is no longer just about what lurks behind a tree, but about what lurks behind the screen and the code that runs our lives. Yet, as terrifying as these creatures can be, there is a strange beauty in their evolution. They are no longer just warnings or punishments for those who stray too far from the path. They have become something more complex, creatures that embody our confusion, our contradictions, our struggle with technology, identity, and the unknown future. The yokai are changing, but they still speak to us in ways that words alone cannot. They challenge us to confront our fears, not just of the supernatural, but of the digital world we have created for ourselves. There are games where players become yokai hunters, using the latest technology to trap or fight these creatures. There are films where the yokai are no longer just figures of terror, they are characters we can relate to, their pain, anger, or confusion resonating deeply with the viewer. The Yukiana, once a chilling spirit of vengeance, now sometimes carries a sorrow that mirrors the loneliness and isolation felt by those who navigate the cold expanse of modern life. The Rokurokubi, with her elongated neck, no longer just frightens. She's a symbol of alienation, of the lengths we go to hide ourselves in a world that constantly watches. Through social media, the yokai have a voice again. The figures once confined to rural Japan have found new homes in the homes of millions. Whether it's the simple retelling of a story, a piece of art posted on Instagram, or a viral video about a creature's legendary power, the yokai are constantly reinventing themselves. They morph and adapt as quickly as technology does, reflecting our changing world. They are creatures that do not just live in the past, but thrive in the present, constantly evolving and challenging our perceptions. At the same time, the darkness of the past is not lost. Even as the yokai take on new forms, there is a deep respect for their ancient roots. The spirit of the yokai still pulses with the same energy, the same unsettling power. It's the same eerie chill that runs down your spine when you see a figure in the corner of a dark room. The same sensation when you hear something rustling in the shadows and wonder, what is it? Is it just the wind, or something more? The yokai have always been able to speak to that part of us, the part that cannot help but imagine what lies beyond the known, what lies in the darkness. But in today's world, that darkness is more real than ever. It's not just in the remote mountain paths or old abandoned houses, it's in our screens, and our connection to each other, and the anonymity of the internet. The yokai represent that darkness, the unknown, the thing that cannot be explained, that still lurks just out of sight, beyond our control. And maybe that's what makes them so captivating now. The more we try to understand, the more we discover how little we actually know. The yokai remind us of that. They remind us that, in a world full of technology and information, there is still much that is beyond our comprehension, beyond our grasp. Even as they change, as they become part of new stories, new legends, they remain a reflection of our deepest fears, hopes, and longings. The digital age has not erased the yokai, it has given them a new voice, a new form, and perhaps, a new life. In every click, in every image, in every whisper of their names, the yokai are still with us. And no matter how much the world changes, they will always be there, waiting for us to confront them, to learn from them, to fear them, forever part of our story. In the stillness of the night, when the world is asleep and the quiet hum of life fades into the distance, a whisper dances in the air, a faint, soft call from somewhere unseen, a feeling that creeps into your thoughts. It's not fear, exactly, but something that tugs at the edges of your understanding. Something beyond the logic of day-to-day life, a pull that makes you think, what if there's more to the world than what we see? What if there are things hidden just out of sight, waiting in the shadows, always watching, always waiting? There are moments when we encounter these whispers, these feelings, and we brush them off. We laugh at the idea of spirits, of creatures that don't belong, of things that shouldn't exist. But deep inside, there's a part of us that wonders, that still feels the tremor of fear mixed with curiosity. Maybe it's because, in some way, we're all connected to the past. We carry with us the echoes of stories told long ago, stories that have shaped our understanding of the world. Yokai, those strange and mysterious creatures, are part of that. They aren't just myths from a forgotten time. They are fragments of our collective consciousness, parts of the cultural fabric that still stirs something inside us. What makes these creatures so compelling, so persistent in their hold on us, is that they tap into the most primal parts of who we are. They speak to our fears, our hopes, and our flaws. They remind us that even in a world that seems so controlled, so ordered, there's always something lurking, something that we can't control. The yokai make us confront the things we can't explain, the things that make us feel small in a vast, chaotic world. And yet, they also show us something more. There's a beauty in the unknown, a wonder in the mysterious. There's a lesson in every encounter, a chance to see the world through a different lens. To study yokai is to understand something about ourselves. It's to recognize that we are not just products of the modern world, with its bright lights and perfect facades, but also creatures shaped by the same fears and wonders that have haunted humanity for centuries. It's a way of looking at the world and realizing that there are still things we don't understand, still mysteries that can't be explained by logic or science. And perhaps, just maybe, that's okay. The yokai, with all their strangeness, teach us that it's okay to embrace the unknown, to be curious about the things that scare us, to open our minds to the possibility that there's more to life than meets the eye. There's something deeply personal about the stories of yokai. Whether they're the vengeful spirits that haunt a mountain pass or the mischievous creatures that play tricks on the unsuspecting, they reflect something about the human condition. They speak to the darkest parts of our psyche, the fears that we try to hide, the regrets we carry, the longing for something we can't quite define. And yet, they also speak to our resilience, our ability to face the unknown with courage, and the strength we have to overcome even the most terrifying challenges. The yokai remind us that we are not alone in our struggles, that there are stories and creatures that have faced the same things, and somehow, they endure. In studying these creatures, and learning about their roles in folklore, we start to understand the importance of stories themselves. Stories are not just entertainment, they are a way for cultures to express their deepest truths, their collective fears, and their hopes for the future. The yokai are not just figures of terror, they are mirrors, reflections of who we are as individuals and as a society. They help us to understand the world we live in and the fears that shape us. They show us the power of narrative to help us make sense of the world, to guide us when things feel uncertain, and to remind us that even in the darkest moments, there is always a light to be found. As we look around today, it's easy to forget how much of the world is still beyond our comprehension. In an age of technology and science, we like to think we have everything figured out. We can explain how the world works, why things happen, and what causes the mysteries that once baffled us. But even in this age of knowledge, there's still that nagging feeling, the sense that there's more to life than what we can see, that there are still corners of the world where the unknown lives. And in those corners, the yokai still thrive, still wait to be discovered, still hold a place in our hearts. There's something beautiful in that, isn't there? The fact that even in a world where everything seems explainable, there are still stories that can unsettle us, that can make us pause and think, that can remind us that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. The yokai continue to capture our imagination because they represent that space between what we know and what we don't. They are creatures of the unknown, of the dark, but they are also creatures of possibility. They are not bound by the rules of the world as we understand them. They break the boundaries, challenge the ordinary, and remind us that there's always something more to discover, something more to see. It's in the stories of these spirits, these beings from another world, that we find a connection to the past and to each other. The yokai are not just creatures to be feared or to be locked away in old legends, they are bridges between generations, between cultures, and between the known and the unknown. They teach us to look beyond the surface, to question what we believe, and to keep seeking answers, even when we don't have all the pieces. They encourage us to embrace the darkness, not as something to fear, but as something that can lead to understanding, to growth, and to discovery. When we study the yokai, we are not just learning about ancient myths or folklore. We are learning about ourselves, about what it means to be human, and about the things that connect us all. In a world that can feel disconnected, the yokai remind us that there's more to life than what we can see, that the stories we tell are what shape us, and that even in the most terrifying of creatures, there's a lesson to be learned. The yokai continue to be relevant because they speak to something deep inside us, something timeless, something that will always be part of who we are. And that, perhaps, is the most enduring part of all.